Gray was in high spirits. He could still recall the gloom that had settled over him when he first stepped into the canyon. Now, with a grin tugging at his lips, he muttered, "Who would have thought this place could be so rewarding?" After waking the unconscious bandits, Gray had them lead him to their hideout. To his surprise, it was barely 250 meters from where they had fought. Nestled discreetly within the rocky terrain, the hideout was impressively concealed, an ideal base for criminals hoping to evade pursuers. Inside, the place was surprisingly well furnished. Chairs, tables, and beds arranged neatly, with enough decoration to feel almost homely. Gray could tell they'd robbed plenty of travelers to afford this level of comfort. He still chuckled at the memory of their stunned faces when he demanded all their money. The spoils were considerable: 2 gleaming gold coins and an estimated 1,000 silver coins. The bulk of their fortune, though, was in copper. Gold coins were rare, each one worth 100 silver. To Gray, that was a fortune. 1 gold coin alone would have bought him a decent horse and a more comfortable journey. Without hesitation, he pocketed the gold and silver coins, leaving the coppers behind. It wasn't generosity, just practicality. Lugging around that many copper coins would be a hassle. "I'm such a kind soul," Gray quipped aloud. The bandit leader looked like he might faint at the comment. Had Gray seen this much money earlier, he probably wouldn't have bothered trekking through the canyon. But now, with wealth in his pocket, he looked down on copper as if it were dirt. "This line of work, it's really profitable," he mused, a strange mix of awe and amusement in his voice. For a fleeting moment, he considered turning to banditry himself. "I can't just go around robbing people," he said thoughtfully, but the way he said it made it clear the idea hadn't fully left his mind. He shook his head. "Forget it. I'm rich for now. That's enough. I'll hunt magical beasts, sell their cores, earn it the right way." Willow City was alive with activity. As the closest city to the Misty Mountain, it was a hub for adventurers preparing for expeditions into the Wild Range. Gray sat comfortably in a bustling restaurant, enjoying a hearty meal, both to celebrate his new wealth and to gather information. This spot was a hotbed for rumors, and he didn't have to wait long before something interesting floated his way. "An Origin Plane powerhouse was killed," someone exclaimed. Gray's ears perked up. He turned toward the source of the voice. 2 men at the next table engaged in an animated discussion. "They say he crossed into the Lord of the Mountains territory and was killed on the spot," one man said gravely. "The others escaped with their lives." "Barely." The second man nodded. "Apparently, they were chasing a natural treasure. They saw traces of it and followed it there." "A treasure?" the first man echoed, his eyes gleaming. "Yeah. No one knows exactly what it is, just that it hasn't fully formed yet. Word is, a new team is forming to head deeper into the mountain." Gray could see the disappointment in the expressions of those listening around them. Most were too weak to compete for such a treasure. He stood up and approached the 2 men. "Excuse me, can you tell me which part of the mountain this treasure appeared in?" he asked politely. The man looked hesitant, until Gray placed a silver coin on the table. In a flash, the man pocketed it and leaned forward to share what he knew. Gray thanked him and left the restaurant. "Good," he thought. It's in the southern part. I'm headed north. If the treasure had been where he was going, Gray would have seriously reconsidered. He had no intention of challenging the Lord of the Misty Mountain, a beast rumored to be half a step into the Overlord Plane. If that monster got the treasure, its power would skyrocket. Gray made his way toward the mountain. Thanks to the news, he now planned to finish his mission quickly and leave. On the road, he saw many adventurers heading into the mountain. Some in groups, some alone. All of them, without a doubt, were moving south. What surprised him most was that many of them were only in the Arcane Plane. Despite the danger, they rushed toward the treasure like moths to a flame. Most wouldn't return. Some wouldn't even make it far. Origin Plane beasts roamed those depths. Gray didn't dwell on it. He had other goals. He entered the mountain with a different purpose: to train. He wanted to sharpen his techniques, quicken their execution. Had he been faster back in the canyon, the bandits wouldn't have troubled him. He also intended to get better with his blades, learn their weight, their rhythm, their range. To do that, he needed real battles. And for that, he would need to go deeper. The beasts in the outer region weren't worth his time. Gray's eyes narrowed with focus as he pressed onward, deeper into the mountain's heart. Thud. A woo. The pained cry of a beast echoed through the forest as it was hurled through the air, slamming into a tree with brutal force. Deep gashes were visible across its body, blood trickling onto the earth below. It was a wind wolf, typically dangerous predators capable of reaching the late stages of the Arcane Plane and occasionally breaking into the Origin Plane. This one, however, was less impressive, still lingering at the peak of the fusion plane. It hadn't even awakened the signature wind blades that made the species so feared. Strangely, it was alone. Wind wolves rarely traveled without a pack. Now badly wounded, the wolf lay helpless on the forest floor, its breath shallow and eyes locked onto the approaching human with pure hatred. The young man walked over, raising his blade without hesitation. A swift stab to the skull ended the beast's life. Gray exhaled, lowering his weapon. Just a fusion plane beast, and yet, it took this much effort. He had ventured over 4 kilometers into the misty mountain range, which spanned more than 700 kilometers in length and over 300 in width. This was still the outer region, relatively safe, according to the information he had gathered. Past the 150-kilometer mark, however, beasts in the arcane plane became commonplace. That said, the outer zones weren't without danger. Powerful magical beasts sometimes roamed unpredictably. For centuries, humans and beasts had been locked in a relentless war of survival. Beasts viewed humans as a threat and killed on sight. Humans hunted beasts for power, resources, and survival. The conflict had no end in sight. Gray had already battled 6 beasts, each at the late fusion plane. The fights were difficult but served his purpose well, sharpening his technique and familiarizing himself with his weapons. Progress was steady. He was still too slow when activating his abilities, and in a fight against an arcane plane beast, that hesitation could prove fatal. He looted the core of the wind wolf and slipped it into his pack before leaving. The blood would attract more beasts, and Gray had no intention of sticking around. With sunset approaching, he began looking for shelter. He found it in a hollow at the base of a giant tree, likely the former den of a magical beast. It looked long abandoned. After a quick patrol of the surroundings, Gray cut branches to conceal the entrance and settled in for the night. Being an earth elementalist gave him a unique advantage. He could sense vibrations in the ground. Combined with his natural vigilance, he was nearly impossible to ambush. Gray sat cross-legged and soon drifted into a light sleep. Late at night. Rustle, rustle. Soft movements disturbed the grasses. A pack of wind wolves, larger and more intimidating than the last, slinked through the forest. Their sleek black fur shimmered under the moonlight. Their emerald eyes gleamed with predatory focus as they advanced, silent but deadly. Gray's eyes snapped open. Southward. Something was approaching. He couldn't hear it, but the earth beneath him trembled ever so slightly, telltale vibrations of an oncoming threat. He sat up immediately, calculating. A group of beasts. They'll be here in under 2 minutes. He couldn't identify their strength, only their numbers and direction. Judging by the pacing and formation, it had to be a wolf pack. There were 3 primary wolf packs known in the Misty Mountains: gray wolves, wind wolves, and ice wolves. Of the 3, ice wolves were the most dangerous. Gray wolves were common and weak. Wind wolves, somewhere in between. Peering from the hollow, Gray spotted the approaching threat, just as he suspected, a pack of wind wolves. Some were fully grown, likely at the early arcane plane, while others were juveniles. He counted between 10 and 15. They don't look too tough, he muttered. But I'll have to move camp after this fight. The wolves caught his scent and surged forward. Gray drew both short blades in a flash. The wolves, empowered by the wind element, lunged with terrifying speed, but Gray wasn't slow either. Within the first 2 minutes, 4 wolves had already fallen, wounded and yelping in pain as blood spattered across the trees. Crash! 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 Gray kicked 3 wolves away in quick succession. His blade movements were growing more refined with each clash. Not a single injury on his part. His techniques were finally syncing with his instincts. And then, the howling began. A deep, united howl echoed from the wolves, and it wasn't long before the response came. Howls erupted from all sides. Gray stiffened. That howl was a signal. But how did the others get so close? Emerging from the shadows were 8 more wind wolves, stronger, faster, fiercer. Each one pulsed with arcane plane power. 21 wolves in total. His eyes widened as they launched their first attack. Over 20 razor-sharp wind blades materialized in an instant, cutting through the air like scythes. Lightning steps. Gray activated his movement technique, blurring from his position just before the wind blade struck. He barely escaped. Seriously? My first night here and I can't even sleep in peace, he growled, weaving between trees. Then louder, sarcastic, Brother Wolf. Let's settle this civilly, shall we? I admit, I may have killed your brother. Or sister. Or cousin. I apologize. The wolves howled back, only more aggressively. Of course not, Gray sighed, dodging another volley. Didn't think that would work anyway. He gritted his teeth and gripped his blades tightly, readying for the storm.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
On seeing he was surrounded, Gray tried to leap into a nearby tree. He was able to dodge the first and second barrage of attack, but being mid-air, he was unable to dodge the next attack. He quickly used the earth wall technique. Although it was late, it was able to help him from getting any major damage. He was knocked off course by the impact of the attacks hitting his wall. The moment he landed back on the floor, he quickly deployed the only technique in his arsenal, which wasn't a single target attack. Shattered rock. Suddenly, the nearby earth began to crack and shatter. 3 skull-sized pieces of rock flew up and began to circle around Gray's head. These 3 rocks were all covered with earthen specks of light. He let out a deep shout. The 3 rocks rapidly shot off, carrying a gust of wind with them. Smash! 2 of the 3 stones were able to accurately hit 2 wolves, with one of them missing its target. The wolves who were hit cried in pain. With 2 of the wolves in the arcane plane injured, he only had to deal with the remaining 6. The others attacked with more fervor as they saw their colleagues getting injured. The wolves were able to catch up with Gray due to their fast nature. I need to come up with a way to deal with the ones in the arcane plane, Gray thought. He was thinking of a plan to deal with the wolves as he dodged their attacks while running. If there were only 2 wolves in the arcane plane present, he was confident he could deal with them. But with over 5 present, he wasn't that strong yet. Gray saw a huge tree up ahead and an idea struck him. He quickly dashed towards it. When he got close, he leaped towards it. Gray stomped heavily on the tree with his right leg while turning his body mid-air. Lightning steps. While in a vertical position, he used his movement technique added with the force he generated from rebounding off the tree. He launched back towards the charging wolves and stabbed both his blades into the head of the unlucky wolf which he targeted. The wolf died on the spot with blood flowing out of his head. There were now only 5 wolves remaining among the wolves in the arcane plane. They had outrun the wolves in the fusion plane. After killing one of the wolves, Gray created a distance between himself and the wolves. The wolf he killed was one of the leaders of the pack. Of the 8 wolves that appeared, only 2 were in the second stage of the arcane plane. The remaining 6 were all in the first stage of the arcane plane, just like Gray. The wolves stared at him with furious eyes. The last surviving leader gave a furious howl and they all charged towards Gray. Gray was overjoyed when he noticed they weren't going to use their troublesome attacks again. Magical beasts always engage in physical battles, and due to their strong defenses, they rarely lose out to humans in terms of it. When Gray saw them coming, he held his blade in a reverse grip and charged straight at them. After his battle with the bandits, he gained some experience and he had been able to improve his fighting abilities since he entered the mountain. He had engaged in different battles and had grown with them. Gray dodged the attacks of the wolves, while also dealing strikes of his own. Soon, he was able to injure another 2 but wasn't able to deal the last strike since he was disturbed by the remaining 3. The rest wolves caught up with them. Gray immediately came up with a skill that would deal more damages to the wolves. He coated his blades with lightning. This made his attacks more destructive. When the last leader saw his pack members being killed one by one, it immediately turned tails and ran. The surviving wolves all turned around and also escaped with their leader. Gray caught up with the injured 2 at the arcane plane and ended their lives. Hoo, they're finally gone. Gray breathed heavily. He was already sweating from the battle and he had already depleted most of his elemental essence. Using the techniques over and over again was really straining. Thankfully they left. I don't think I would have been able to support any more techniques. Gray felt lucky since he was able to overcome this challenge. If it were others in the same plane as he was, they wouldn't have been able to support this much use of techniques. But Gray's essence was thicker, hence it was more durable. This is a great haul. With the cores from these 3 beasts, I would be able to sell them for a lot. This was the first arcane plane beast's cores he had acquired. He was only able to kill 3 of the arcane plane wolves, with the rest escaping. The majority of his kills were those in the fusion plane, but he had no complaints. Gray retraced his steps and was able to easily find the tree where he slept. He picked up his backpack and moved to a different location since the noise from the battle must have alerted nearby beasts. He found a cave in a secluded area in the mountain. After thorough searching to ensure it was unoccupied and that his environment was safe, he found something to block the entrance of the cave. He immediately started cultivating to recover the elemental essence he lost during the fight. The next morning, Gray was up early. He had completely recovered the essence and he even felt he made some improvements in his cultivation. He scoured the area and quickly found a pig. A little spark of lightning and his fire was up. He ate as much as he could to replenish his physical strength and also saved some for dinner. Unfortunately, There was no way he could take the entire meat with him. Gray went deeper into the forest and had different battles. Things were going well for him since his main purpose of coming, which was training, was already going really well, and he had also acquired some beast cores. He had met humans during his journey, but they had always avoided each other once they saw. Apart from magical beasts, humans were the major threats here. There are cases of people attacking each other because of greed or other reasons. Gray hadn't met anyone who attacked him, but he had seen corpses of people over the course of his journey. Some of the corpses had marks of being killed by beasts, while others, you could clearly see the traces of human attacks on their body. Gray had always known this is a place of survival of the fittest. Only the strong could enter the deeper regions of the Misty Mountain. Most of the people who come in here are hunters who are trying to get beast cores to sell. Getting a core from the beasts can be taxing and even very dangerous, but if they were able to ambush others who had already had some cores, they would be able to acquire more cores with lesser works. After another 2 days, Gray soon passed the 150 kilometers mark in the mountain. Now he had to be extra careful with his movements since he wasn't strong enough yet to walk freely in this part of the forest. Although he could have reached past it sooner, he wanted to gain more training from his stay here. He would soon get to where the lizards were said to be located in the mountain. Due to the thrill of his training, he had completely forgotten about what he heard about before entering the forest. When he got to this part, he noticed human activity had increased and he would see groups of people or individuals within a range of every 500 meters. Gray was very cautious with them since he didn't know them and would avoid them as much as possible. Arg! Gray heard a shout of pain coming from his left while he was walking. He stared at the direction the shout came from and went closer to know what was going on. He saw a group of youths being attacked by some beasts, 3 boys and 2 girls. They were all in the early stages of the arcane plane from the auras coming from their bodies. Gray could clearly sense the fear in them. One of the boys had been injured on his right leg and could barely stand on his own. The 2 young ladies in the group were too scared to even attack. The 2 boys left were the only ones who were still able to fight, although barely. The group was being attacked by 4 conflagration apes. These apes were all fire attributes magical beasts and could deal some major damage if they get too close. Clearly this was this group of youths' first time heading out to train. Seems like they got too confident and charged all the way past the 150 kilometers mark. The sudden attack distracted the ape for some time, which gave the students some breathing space. Both boys who were attacking also stopped looking in the direction the attacks came from. Are you crazy? Why did you stop attacking? They suddenly heard a shout which made them recover quickly. They capitalized on the fact that the apes were still trying to make heads of what was going on and were able to fatally injure one of them with a combined attack. With Gray joining in the attacks, they managed to kill one of the apes with the others escaping. Magical beasts in the arcane plane are far more intelligent than those in the fusion plane. The first time they try to do when losing was to escape. They only try to fight to the death when they know there is no way out. Thank you, one of the boys said while deeply bowing to Gray. Gray turned and looked at the youths calmly. He shifted his gaze to the one who was hurt. Thank you for lending a hand. If it weren't for you, we would have been in a tough spot, the youth said again. It's okay, Gray said coolly. When the youths got a clear view of his face, they were stunned. The boys almost thought he was a girl, as he could almost be described using the term beautiful. The girls on the other hand were dazed. They never expected the youth who saved them to be this handsome. What are you all doing here anyway? Gray turned to the youth who thanked him and asked. My name is Claude and this is Aaron. The 2 ladies are Nina and Tessa. And that's Ryan. The youth introduced himself and the others before continuing. We're from the Idris Academy. We came out for training. We didn't expect to be attacked by those apes just after getting here, Claude said with a wry smile. This is your first day here? Asked Gray. On seeing how they lacked experience, he guessed it probably might be. Yes, we heard you can only find beasts in the arcane plane after passing the 150 kilometers mark, Claude answered truthfully. Claude and the rest dropped their head in embarrassment. It was just like Gray said. After finding out beasts in the arcane plane were present after the 150 kilometers mark, they charged in because they felt confident in their abilities. Clearly, they're still lacking. We'll not be able to stay here longer, since we have to take Ryan back to recover, Aaron said. Okay then, I'll be on my way now, Gray smiled before turning to leave. After Gray left, we were lucky he showed up, else Claude shuddered when he thought of what the outcome of the battle might be. Yeah, the rest nodded in unison. They truly were thankful for Gray's help. Gray was already getting close to the territory of the red lizards. Although not only the lizards stay at this part of the mountain, they make up the majority of the beasts in the area. I should be close now. I wonder what they want to do with the eggs of the lizard. It was quite baffling since the person only asked for the eggs and nothing more. He soon found the first lizard's nest, but unfortunately, even after going through a tough struggle with the lizard, it was empty. The next nest he found, he couldn't get close because the lizard was already in the mid-stages of the arcane plane. Gray kept on searching until he finally found the right target. It was a red lizard in the second stage of the arcane plane. Although it might be troublesome, Gray could still deal with it given his prowess. He quickly made short work of the lizard and found only 2 eggs inside its nest. One to go, Gray extracted the core from the lizard as he kept it with the eggs. His backpack was already almost filled. Luckily, the eggs weren't too big. They were the size of a human head. His backpack could hold them, but that would be it. He had already acquired close to 10 cores of beasts in the arcane plane and more of those in the fusion plane. Gray went in search of the last egg since he was required to bring back 3. His experience in the mountains so far has been just as he wanted. He is now able to use his techniques faster and was also growing adept at fighting. Gray's learning speed truly was beyond normal. That day ended without Gray seeing his target. Although he got into some battles with some beasts, he was able to end it quickly. The only regret he had was that his backpack couldn't contain all the cores from the beasts. The next morning, Gray got up and continued his search for the last egg. He soon found a nest inside a cave. Hopefully I can get the last egg from this nest. Gray had already found some nest, but either there are no eggs or the lizards are stronger than him. He wanted to train to be stronger, not kill himself. Once he attacks and notices the difference in strength, he'll quickly escape to avoid injuries. Getting injured this deep in the mountain won't be good for him since he was alone. Gray could deal with those in the second stage of the arcane plane, he could hold out against those in the third stage, but he doesn't stand a chance against those in the mid-stages. Gray walked deeper into the cave with caution. If the lizard here is in the mid-stages, he will immediately flee the cave. When he got closer, he heaved a sigh as he saw an egg, but the lizard wasn't present. Seems like the lizard isn't in the cave. Gray was quick to act and quickly kept the egg in his backpack and turned towards the exit. Hiss. Gray heard the sound of something running quickly into the cave. He raised his head to see a huge 8-meter-long lizard staring at him with vicious eyes. Do these things place a trigger in their eggs so whenever someone touches it they will be aware? Gray couldn't help but ask. He thought this would be the easiest egg he would acquire, but seems like it's not the case. What was more frustrating was the fact that the lizard in front of him was already in the 4th stage of the arcane plane. There was no way he could defeat it. Even defending against it was not going to be easy. The lizard screeched and charged at him. It spat out a huge fireball that seemed to occupy most of the cave. Gray cursed his bad luck before using the earth wall technique to protect himself. After the fireball died down, the lizard was shocked when it couldn't find the human it just attacked. It screeched again and started searching for Gray. Gray was nowhere to be found. After some time, a rock fell from the side of the wall on the cave. A human body could be seen in the walls of the cave. K. Gray cursed before vomiting a mouthful of blood. He was really angry. After the red lizard attacked with a fireball, Gray decided to use his earth wall to block the attack. Who would have thought that the force from the attack would impale him into the side of the cave? Luckily, the earth wall he used followed him and ended up covering him in the wall of the cave. At least it was able to hide me from that stupid beast. Gray felt lucky also. He knew escaping from the red lizard would have been hard given the fact that he was inside the cave with the lizard being the one close to the exit. For Gray to escape, he would have to pass the lizard, which would have been difficult. It's lucky I need to turn in this mission, else I would have waited until it returns then teach it a good lesson. Gray snorted coldly. Crack. Cracking sounds could be heard from deep inside the cave. Clearly, the lizard was coming back. Damn, can't it just let me act tough in peace? Gray immediately turned tails and fled the cave without a second thought. Who was he kidding? There was no way he would want to face the beast again with his current strength. Besides, he was already slightly injured and needed to rest in order to recover his strength. Gray successfully escaped from the area and went in search of a place where he could heal himself without worries. Since the injury wasn't that severe, simple meditation and some tonic would do. The tonic was made from a special herb that had healing properties. My mission is already successful with the acquisition of this egg. I should still have a little over a week left before I hand in the mission. Gray calculated the time he left the sect and noticed he had been gone for 6 days now. I should heal up before I plan on what next to do. He would take it one step at a time. Since he wasn't in a race against time, there was no harm in resting. Gray healed up, but his body was still a mess. I haven't washed up since I came into the mountain. He enjoyed the refreshing feeling one gets after washing up. Gray decided he would search for a river in the mountain. It shouldn't be that hard since the Misty Mountain was huge. There was bound to be a river somewhere. He started searching, but he made sure not to head in deeper into the mountain since he was already having a hard time with the beasts here. If he accidentally encounters a stronger beast, There was no telling if he would be as lucky as he was back in the cave. Gray avoided most of the beasts that came his way. He has been searching for nearly the entire day without any results. He made camp and started eating the last piece of meat he had with him. It was already sunset. Gray always finds a place where he would stay before it gets dark completely. He suddenly saw smoke coming from the south. Who would be so foolish to make a fire in the woods when it's already getting dark? Out of curiosity, Gray headed in the direction the smoke was coming from. When Gray got there, he was surprised to see a familiar face. It's them, but why are they still here? He was puzzled. The people he saw were the two young ladies from the Idris Academy, Nina and Tessa. Since Gray was already an acquaintance, he thought it would be best to advise them against what they were doing. He walked closer to them. When the two young ladies heard the sound of footsteps, they immediately sprang to their feet and they were shivering from fright. Gray was surprised by their reaction, but what shocked him most was the state both ladies were in. Their hairs were unkempt and some injuries could be seen on their bodies. They looked visibly exhausted and were pale. "It's me, don't be afraid," Gray spoke up when he saw the girls were shivering in fright. The girls got a closer look at his face before tearing up instantly. They both ran towards him and started crying. Gray was stunned by the sudden intimacy and couldn't speak for some time. "What happened to you two, and where are the others?" Gray asked them after getting himself together. Although both girls can't be called world-toppling beauties, they were still well above average and they had great figures. The tight clothes they wore brought out their hourglass shapes more. How can two beauties be alone here? Gray's mind couldn't help but start wandering. But he didn't have any other thoughts about the girls and quickly separated himself from their embrace so they could speak. "On our way out of the mountain, we were attacked by a group of mercenaries," Tessa said while sticking to Gray closely. "Thanks to Aaron and Claude, we were able to escape. But we don't know where they are now," she continued. "What about the injured one?" Gray had already forgotten their names since he didn't really put it in his head. He felt they were people he would only see by chance, so what's the need of remembering their names? He would recognize them if he sees them, but remembering their names was something different. "Ryan is dead. Because of his injury he was unable to protect himself," Nina answered this time. "The leader of the mercenary is already at the third stage of the arcane plane. We don't know if Claude and Aaron were able to escape since they blocked them so I and Tessa could escape," she continued. "And you decided to flee back into the mountain was the best choice?" asked Gray with a weird tone. "It's understandable that they were attacked, but why would you flee into the mountain region again? It just doesn't make sense." "We were panicking and since they came from our front, we could only flee backward," Tessa explained. "So there might be a group of mercenaries searching for you too as we speak?" Gray asked. "Yes," both ladies answered in unison. "And you thought setting up a fire was a good idea?" he asked again. Both girls looked at each other, confused by his questions. "Do you know how I found you two?" Gray asked another question. The girls shook their heads. They were still baffled how he found them. "Because you called me here," Gray said with a light smile. The girls were surprised by his answer. How did we call him here? This was what they were asking themselves. "Because of the fire. You should know that you shouldn't make fires here when it's dark. It attracts unwanted guests." Gray put out the fire before he finished what he was saying. He could tell these young ladies weren't used to a hard life and the ordeals they had gone through lately was still too much for them to take. He suddenly looked behind him and furrowed his brow. Too late. 6 men walked out of the woods with evil grins and eyes filled with lust. Both girls immediately turned paler from fear. Gray's gaze turned cold as he glanced at the men. The men were all in the arcane plane with the one at the front was already the third stage. This is going to be troublesome. Although beasts are stronger, humans are much more difficult to deal with in the same plane. Well, that only applies to beasts who haven't completely awoken their intelligence. Most beasts in the arcane plane have already awoken their intelligence, only some are much more intelligent. Some beasts are even more cunning than their human counterpart. If not for those morons who delayed us, they would already have been in our arms. But it's not too late, the night is still fresh, another said lewdly. When Gray heard their conversation, he understood the reason they were attacked. They had been overcome by lust, after being in the mountains for so long and not being with any women. Seeing the young beautiful ladies, their lust erupted. "Brat, leave here now and we will act like you were never here," the leader said while looking at Gray. Both girls looked at Gray with hopeful eyes. He was their only hope currently, and they knew since the mercenaries have caught up with them, there's no way they could fight with them. Gray shifted his gaze to both girls. He sighed before asking, "Can you at least deal with one each?" If they couldn't deal with even one of the mercenaries, he would leave them to their fate. He knew the rules of the jungle, only the strong survive. There was no way he was going to risk his life battling these guys alone when there were two arcane plane elementalists by his side. If only Alice was here. Gray thought of Alice when he saw how timid the girls were. If Alice was the one these guys dared to have thoughts about, Gray was confident she would kill them instantly. Even if she spares them, they wouldn't be too far from death. Both girls looked at each other. Clearly they weren't confident. Can you at least delay them? Gray asked again. Their timid nature is starting to annoy him. Seriously, if you know you can't fight, what are you even doing here? He almost said this out loud. The girls didn't respond. They've sparred with others before, but that was just sparring. This was a whole different matter. And the death of Ryan affected them mentally as well. Forget it, just don't get in my way, and also, try not to die, Gray reminded them before turning towards the group. There was no way he could hold them all off, so even if the girls are too afraid to fight, they wouldn't have a choice. Seems like you've made a decision, the leader snickered. A very foolish one, I must say, he added coldly. Make sure he doesn't escape like the last ones, boys, he ordered coldly. When the girls heard this statement, they felt a little bit better since both Claude and Aaron were able to escape. Boss, last time was an accident. This time we will surely get the girls, and this hero here would die, the man with a small build said with a tone filled with killing intent. Gray squinted his eyes. They want to kill me. Interesting. This was the first time he was going to have a life and death battle with humans. He unsheathed both his blades. This time there is no room for errors. When he battled with the bandits, he noticed they only wanted to beat him up, so he didn't really care. If he had taken out his weapons then, he would have been able to easily deal with them. The mercenaries were all in the arcane plane, so the first challenge for Gray was how to get close to them. When the mercenaries saw Gray taking out a weapon, they stopped their initial charge. If Gray had a technique that he uses with the weapon, it would be detrimental to them. The effects of a technique boosted with a weapon were terrifying. But to their surprise, Gray charged at them. Get him, the leader said. When the others heard this, they immediately released different attacks towards him. It was a colorful sight. Earth wall. A 3-meter wall appeared in front of Gray. He stopped and hid behind the wall. The attacks all landed in the wall. Due to Gray's thick elemental essence, the wall was very sturdy. The stronger he becomes, the sturdier it would also become. Gray charged out from behind the wall and headed towards the one closest to him. While Gray was engaged in battle with 4 of the men, the remaining 2 went towards the young ladies. Nina summoned some courage and sent ice arrows towards the men. The leader was able to easily destroy the attack. Pointless struggles, come with us willingly. I promise you will have a good time, he laughed heartily as he said the last parts of the sentence. When Tessa saw Nina's was fighting, she gritted her teeth and also attacked. They knew Gray wouldn't be able to free himself and come help them soon. They can only depend on themselves and drag on as long as they can. Although the leader was stronger than them, there was no way he could neglect their attacks. On Gray's side, the long-range attacks of the mercenaries were annoying since it has been able to keep Gray at bay. Although the attacks can't touch him, he couldn't get close to them. He had tried using shattered rocks, but the speed of the rocks was too slow. The mercenaries were able to easily evade them. I should have taken a long-range lightning attack. Gray regretted his choice of not taking a long-range lightning attack. With the speed of lightning, he would have at least gotten one of them by now. Even if it doesn't kill him, he would have a chance to get close. An idea suddenly struck Gray: shattered rocks. As the rocks flew up towards Gray from the ground, he quickly coated his feet with lightning and did a tornado kick. He kicked one of the rocks strongly. As his foot connected with the rock was almost covered in lightning and shot towards one of the men at a lightning-fast speed. The man only saw a light flash before him before he was sent flying. Gray didn't stop there. He used lightning steps to charge towards another man. The men were distracted by the rock that suddenly hit their companion. Before they realized it, the man with a small build held his throat with blood streaming out of his mouth. Gray had been able to quickly take out 2 of the 4 men. It was almost simultaneously. The remaining 2 men looked at each other in horror. He's a dual elementalist, one of them shouted towards their boss who had almost gotten the girls. The boss turned and saw one of the men lying down a distance away. It was unknown if he was dead or alive. While the man with a small build was lying in a pool of his own blood. Lightning elementalist. Gray stared at his blade which had blood dripping from it. So that's how it feels, huh? He knew every elementalist must kill. He had already known this day would come. He was not a heartless person, so seeing that he ended a life, he was somewhat shaky. If I wasn't strong enough, then I would be the one lying in my own blood. Gray repeated this over again. He knew these people would kill him if he wasn't strong enough. If he didn't kill them, they would kill him. Nina and Tessa were stunned when they heard what the leader said. He's a dual elementalist. and his second element is the rare lightning element. They had thought he was just an earth elementalist because when he helped them the previous time, he only used the earth element. He killed him, Tessa said with a shaky voice. Do you expect him to leave him? Tessa, they deserve more than death. Don't forget they killed Ryan and would have also done the same to Claude and Aaron if they didn't escape, Nina chided. Tessa knew Nina was right, but she still couldn't accept reality. Now she knew why her parents always told her the world was a brutal place and only the strong at heart could make it. You little bastard, I will kill you, the leader roared in anger and threw an attack towards Gray. He was a fire elementalist. Seeing his brothers being killed sent him into a frenzied state. Now he didn't have any thoughts towards the girls, he only wanted to kill Gray now. Gray had already snapped out of the state he was previously when he killed the first man. He immediately got into his battle mode and blocked the flames with his blades which were covered in lightning. Gray dodged to the side, he breathed a sigh when the dragon passed by him. The fire dragon suddenly turned mid-air and charged towards Gray from behind. Gray, who had already escaped to the side, suddenly felt a chill and all the hairs on his body stood up. He immediately summoned a wall all around him. There was no time to think. The first thing that came to his mind when he felt the threat was to set up a defensive line before anything else. He felt danger and his heartbeat intensified to a terrifying level. Just after the walls appeared, it was hit strongly. Boom! The wall at his back suddenly exploded from the violent attack. Rubbles flew everywhere and dust covered the area Gray was located. The girls and the others were all looking at the battle with interest. The men didn't attack since they knew their boss would definitely be able to deal with Gray. Although Gray was strong and was also a dual elementalist, they didn't believe he could skip 2 stages to defeat their boss. There was no way for the girls to escape, so now all they can do was pray Gray can defeat the leader of the group or else they were done for. The leader squinted his eyes and stared at the dust intently. He wanted to know if his ultimate attack got the kid. His plan was perfect. After attacking with a normal fireball, he would send his strongest move just behind it. Even if the opponent was able to dodge the surprise attack, he wouldn't expect what would follow next. When the dust settled, everyone present focused on the place. The earth around the place was shattered and scorched around. Gray couldn't be seen anywhere. Both girls turned dispirited when they didn't see Gray. He lost. I knew the boss would deal with him easily. He didn't even have a corpse left, one of the men said with a smile. Although one of them was dead and it was unknown if the other was alive, it wasn't his problem. They all knew every battle they fought there would be a chance they might die. The prayer he always prays is, if anyone going to die, Lord let it not be me, and it had worked for him so far. And it seems it's still working. I thought it would be difficult, who knew he was just trash, the leader said in disdain. You're next, the leader turned and said icily. But don't worry, I won't kill you. You would have to entertain us every night, he said lewdly as he licked his lips viciously. Despair filled both girls completely. This was the first time they came out to train. One of their friends is dead, they don't know where Claude and Aaron were, and now they are about to be captured by these men. They felt deep regret. If they had known, they would have just stayed at the academy. The other men had already surrounded both girls, and they laughed cruelly. Ha! A surprised sound came out of the leader's mouth. He turned towards the rubble and his pupils dilated from what he saw. Impossible, he blurted out with fear. Crack, crack. Sounds of lightning could be heard all around. The sky suddenly turned cloudy. A hand covered in lightning could be seen pushing the rocks from the body underneath it. Gray stood up from the rubble with a bare upper body with burn marks all around his body. His shirt had been burnt completely and he was currently only covered from his waist down to his knee. From his knee down to his feet was also opened. The remaining cloth on his body had different holes on them. Clearly, they were burnt. Gray floated up into the air. He looked like the god of lightning. Lightning snakes could be seen dancing all around Gray's body. His eyes glowed with bright blue color and his black hair was dancing in the windless night. What is that? The men exclaimed when they saw Gray's appearance. They knew elementalists could cover themselves in their elements completely, but it was something only people in the Overlord plane could achieve. It was impossible for those in the Arcane plane or even the Origin plane to do this. What was even more shocking was the fact that Gray was currently standing midair. That was not something an Arcane plane elementalist could do. Gray looked at them with his emotionless glowing eyes. They all felt terror, including the girls. The pressure Gray was radiating was something they had never felt before. Gray stretched his hands towards the leader and pointed a finger at him. Crack, crack. The clouds were immediately filled with activity. The leader felt a terror he had never felt before. Plop. The leader knelt on the ground. My lord, please spare me, he started begging for his life. He thought Gray was a strong expert who hid his cultivation, and now that he was angered he decided to unleash his full strength. Crack, crack. The activity intensified in the clouds. Clearly, a bolt of lightning would fall soon. The leader was scared shitless. When he noticed Gray didn't respond, he stood up and ran for his life. Crash! A lightning bolt almost the size of an arm came crashing down towards the leader. Bang! The lightning struck the leader fiercely. Arg! A horrid scream could be heard from the location the leader fled to. The rest of the group felt their scalp tingle when they heard this. It's not that they too didn't want to run, but fear had already pinned their legs to the ground. They all raised their heads to see Gray staring at them. Lord, if he's going to kill anyone else, let it not be me. The man said his prayer in his heart with fear. He could swear he saw death when he stared into Gray's eyes a moment ago. Crash, crash, crash. Bang, bang, bang. 3 explosions rang out as 3 bolts of lightning came crashing down on the remaining 3 men. Unfortunately, his prayer didn't work out this time. After eliminating the men, Gray turned his attention towards the 2 girls. Nina and Tessa immediately started shivering with fear. They could still smell the charred flesh of the men and hear the horrid scream of the leader in their heads. They couldn't speak. Gray slowly moved towards them. As he was getting closer, the girls were retreating in fear. He suddenly stopped and looked at them. Suddenly the sky started clearing up and the lightning on Gray's body started dying down. When the last lightning disappeared and his eyes returned to normal, he collapsed. The southern part of the Misty Mountain. What is that? A middle-aged man said while looking at the north suspiciously. Lightning. An Overlord plane expert, another said with fear after he figured out the cause of the lightning. What is an Overlord plane expert doing in the mountain? Don't tell me they're here for the treasure too. A lady asked with apprehension. No, I don't think so. From the aura, the expert must be in a battle with another expert, an old man said. The old man had a wise visage and anyone who sees him will think he's a harmless old man. Only those who were familiar with him knew how cruel he was. Let's go investigate, someone suddenly suggested. Are you insane? The middle-aged man looked at the man who brought up the suggestion like he was a fool. If you want to die you can do it alone, why would you bring up the idea for us all to go together? Were we born on the same day? The old man said with an annoyed tone. The man immediately shut his mouth. He realized he made a mistake by bringing up such a suggestion. The North has already been tagged a danger zone by all the experts gathered here. They were all in the origin plane, but a single Overlord plane expert could kill them like they were ants. Deep in the mountain, a 15-meter stone lion looked towards the north with fear. This was the king of the Misty Mountain. A magical beast that was close to the Overlord plane, yet at the thought of there being an Overlord plane expert in its territory, it was scared. If it were to be someone in the origin plane, it would have come out and attacked without a second thought. The northern part of the Misty Mountain. The entire area was in a silent state. All the beasts close to where the battle took place had already fled the vicinity. The girls looked at the unconscious Gray with gaping mouths. The burns on his body were gone, and his fair skin was visible for them to see. His well-developed muscles and his handsome face were a sight to behold. The girls' emotions went from fear to awe. They were relieved when the sky cleared up. It was a sign Gray wouldn't harm them. But, how can he be so powerful? 2 figures could be seen moving swiftly in the cover of the night. Both were ladies, and on the shoulder of one of them was an unconscious young man. This is a good spot, Nina said towards her companion. Yes, Tessa replied. At their front was a cave that was dimly lit. They had been searching for a place to rest since leaving the place where the battle occurred. They took the unconscious Gray with them, but had only managed to see this unoccupied cave. Strange. Did you notice we didn't come across even one beast all this while? Nina suddenly asked Tessa as she placed Gray on the floor. Yes, I noticed it too. Usually, beasts are very active at night. Tessa nodded, confirming what Nina said. Over the course of their search for a place to rest, they didn't find a beast. Although they didn't want to, but not encountering any felt strange. Forget it, we're safe and that's all that we should be concerned about. Nina walked out of the cave in search of what she was going to use to block the entrance of the cave. She cut down some branches and used them to block the entrance. How do you think he did it? Nina asked as she looked at Gray. What? Tessa asked, clearly not sure of what Nina was talking about. You know, become so strong all of a sudden. Nina still couldn't get her mind off what happened earlier. The way Gray dealt with the mercenaries like they were ants, all he did was stretch out a hand, and it started raining lightning. It was an unforgettable experience, something both girls will not be able to wipe out from their memories for a long time. I don't know. I heard there were secret techniques which are used to raise cultivation levels, but not by this much, Tessa said after some time. She had heard of these secret techniques from her father and knew they were detrimental to the body of the user. These sorts of techniques always comes with an effect towards the user. If what he used was something like this, then it must have been a high-leveled 1-inch. Tessa continued with her hypothesis. I hope he will be alright, Nina said. She didn't care if what Gray used was a secret technique, all she knew was that Gray saved them, and that's what truly matters. She only asked out of curiosity. Both ladies continued talking about other things, and soon they fell asleep. The next morning, Gray opened his eyes and was surprised when he saw rocks all around him. He tried standing, but his body was a wreck. He felt pain all over his body, and it was like something drained all the energy from him. When both girls heard the small sound Gray made when he tried to stand up, they turned around. Gray, you're awake, Tessa said happily. Clearly, she was also worried about their savior. Gray was surprised by the voice. He didn't remember how he got here. A beautiful face suddenly popped up in front of him. Are you feeling any better? Nina asked as she also walked closer. Another beautiful face popped up again. What's going on? Gray blurted out unconsciously. He was confused by what these two beauties were doing here with him. He knew they were alone since he didn't hear any other sounds of movement apart from the two girls. The girls were confused by his question and how he looked at them. Gray was currently looking at them like they were strangers. Could it be that he doesn't remember anything? Tessa whispered to Nina. Maybe. Nina shrugged. Gray suddenly felt a sharp pain in his head. He couldn't help but grit his teeth because of it. He managed to move his hand towards his head. Scenes from the previous night started flashing past his eyes. The pain died down after some time. How did we escape the mercenaries? Gray asked the girls after remembering what happened. The last thing he remembered was setting up a defensive wall. Since that was the last thing he remembered, it obviously meant he lost. There was no one else there, and from the little interactions he had with both girls, there's no way they could defeat the mercenaries. Well, it seems like he remembers us but doesn't know how we escaped, Nina whispered to Tessa. Maybe it's one of the effects of the technique, Tessa whispered to Nina. You know I can hear you, right? Gray spoke again when he saw both girls weren't answering his questions. They finally turned their attention towards him. You don't remember how you defeated them? Nina asked just to be sure. Defeated who? I'm talking about the mercenaries, Gray reminded them. He thought maybe the girls were talking about the apes. Gray's answer showed he really didn't remember, so Nina went on to tell him about everything that happened. Gray's mouth was left agape since he didn't believe the person they were talking about was him. You truly don't remember any of it? Tessa asked. No, I blanked out after his attack destroyed my walls, Gray said sincerely. Could it be because of the pearl? Gray was baffled by what they told him. This is the only thing he could think of which might cause what they said. There's no way he used a secret technique, he didn't even know any. After thinking about it for a while, he still couldn't think of a reason. He could only attribute it to the pearl, which had assimilated with him. Gray was finally able to sit down. When he saw the condition his clothes were, he suddenly thought of his backpack. My money, Gray almost said out loud when he remembered his backpack. Did you bring my backpack? Gray asked. The most important thing to him right now was his money. There was no way he would be able to see free money like that again, and the cores he has gathered were inside. Yes, it's there. Tessa was the one who replied as she pointed towards a particular spot in the cave. When Gray looked at where she was pointing, he saw his backpack along with his blades by the side. Thank you. If you hadn't come, we would have already been captured by now, Nina thanked Gray wholeheartedly. This was the second time Gray had saved their lives. Tessa also offered her thanks when she saw her friend thanking Gray. Gray just nodded as a reply. Since his essence was drained, he wanted to cultivate as soon as possible since they were still in the mountain. He sat crossed-legged and started cultivating. I broke through. Gray was surprised when he noticed this. It hasn't even been up to 15 days since he broke through to the first stage of the arcane plane, but now he had made another breakthrough. Gray replenished some of his essences before they left the cave. The girls wanted to head out of the mountain. They had already experienced so much over their short stay in it. He decided to accompany them till they got to the outer region of the mountain. After that he'll head back in. He didn't have any plans of leaving yet. Since he came out to train, he'll make sure to train till his heart's content. He sat crossed-legged and started meditating. He noticed something while he was cultivating earlier, but he couldn't confirm it while the girls were still present. Now that he was alone, he wanted to check it out. He entered into the chaos space and went towards the stone used for testing. After placing his hand on it, the energy entered his body just like before. After the energy returned, the stone lit up. When Gray saw the results, a look of ecstasy immediately spread across his face. His lightning grade had advanced to blue. The thing that caught his attention was the appearance of a new color on the stone. This represented he had gotten a new element. Although the grade was still pink, it wasn't an issue for him since he could improve it. With the addition of the wind element, he would now be a multi-elementalist. He had not heard of anyone in the history of the Empire being one. Now he would be much faster in terms of cultivation, and also in terms of speed. What an unexpected surprise, Gray said with joy. With this, he could well be said to be ahead of his peers. Gray stayed inside the cave and replenished the rest of his essence. With the addition of the wind element, his absorption speed was almost double his previous speed, and the amount of elemental essence he could refine was terrifying. The essence in the area suddenly dropped. The beasts in the area immediately felt puzzled by the sudden decrease in the essence in the area. When Gray also noticed it, he was shocked. How will I be able to cultivate in the academy if this continues? He felt a headache. Luckily, the essence returned in a short period of time. When he tried it again, it wasn't as strong as the first time. After Gray finished his round of cultivation, it was already midday. I should go check out how strong I've become after breaking through. Then, also get something to eat. He got up and left the cave. Gray mobilized the wind and lightning element in his body and started moving. He felt lighter and much nimbler. His speed had increased to a terrifying level. With his current speed, if he uses lightning steps, his speed should be able to catch up with those wind elementalists in the 4th or even 5th stage of the arcane plane. Due to the refinement his body got from the breakthrough and the new element, his body grew stronger. Added to his normal intense physical training, the strength of his body alone could almost rival those at the peak of the fusion plane. His body will continue going stronger with every breakthrough. Coupled with his own training, he'll be a force to be reckoned with. Now I shouldn't have a problem with defeating those at the 3rd stage of the arcane plane easily. Although I don't know if I can defeat those in the 4th stage, I shouldn't have a problem defending myself and even escaping unharmed. Since there was a gulf between the early and mid stages of the arcane plane, Gray wasn't sure if he could defeat someone in the 4th stage while still being in the 2nd stage. Gray engaged in battle with beasts in the 3rd stage of the arcane plane and was able to defeat them easily without wasting too much effort. He felt great since he was advancing at a fast pace. He knew once his friends noticed his cultivation after his return, they would be shocked. The southern part of the mountain. The treasure is about to completely mature, the old man amongst the group said. The others had all felt it also. They looked at the valley ahead of them with greed visible in their eyes. Getting one of the treasures meant a chance to break through to the Overlord plane. They had all been stuck in the origin plane for a long time now with no hope of breaking through. The old man walked up to the middle-aged man in the group. Hey Mark, why don't we join hands together to take the fruits? You can feel the amount of essence in the right. Even if we got one, we would be able to share it equally and break through our current bottlenecks. The middle-aged man didn't reply and stared at the valley, instead deep in thoughts. He knew for one person to be able to successfully get one of the fruits would be very difficult. Inside the valley, a tree which was about 4 meters in height and 3 meters thick could be seen in an open space. There were only 2 red-colored fruits on it. This was what they were all here for. This tree was a rare treasure that was birthed from the essence of the world. Its fruits are filled with pure essence, which was very beneficial to all elementalists. Even those in the Overlord plane wouldn't mind taking them. Not too far from the valley, in the deepest part of the mountain, the stone lion raised its head and looked in the direction of the valley. Its gigantic body got up in a flash and charged towards the valley at an insane speed. Its body clearly didn't hinder its speed in any way. Not just the stone lion, other beasts in the origin plane all over the mountain were all headed in the direction of the valley. They all wanted to get a chance at the treasure. The struggle for the treasure was about to start. Although the stone lion was the strongest, there was no way it could dominate them all. It was a wise creature and would definitely leave the scene after getting one of the fruits. Now it was up to fate for the one who would get the other one. All this had nothing to do with Gray. He was currently humming a tune to himself as he roasted the leg of a wild boar. He was expertly adding the required ingredients to make sure the taste of the meat would be the best. Gray brought ingredients with him when he wanted to leave the academy to ensure he was always prepared. After some time, a sweet fragrance wafted in the air. The color of the meat had already turned into a golden brown. This was a result of Gray smearing honey on the meat before roasting it. Gray took a piece of the meat and tasted it. He looked at the sky in pure bliss from the taste of the meat. It had a great taste. Ah, he moaned with pleasure as he took another bite. Slowly but surely he finished the meat. He patted his stomach with joy before heading towards a spring not too far from him. He accidentally found it when he was searching for a meal. Gray removed his clothes before diving into the water. What a great life, he sighed with pleasure. After he washed up, he walked over to a huge tree not too far from the spring and started cultivating. He wasn't scared of being sneak attacked since now he had 2 sensory abilities. With the earth element, he could sense any vibrations on the ground, and with the wind element, he could feel any disturbance in the air caused by fast movements. It was about to turn dark, so he decided to rest till the next day. Later that night. Bam! The sound of something crashing heavily into the ground reverberated in the mountain. Gray was startled by the sound and immediately stood up. He walked out of the hole in the tree and looked towards the south. It came from that direction. Gray had unknowingly drifted close to the southern part of the mountain. After waiting for some time and confirming it wasn't a fight, he headed in the direction cautiously. When he got there, he was surprised to see a man lying in a pit motionless. Clearly, the pit was made when the man fell and hit the ground heavily. Gray looked around to confirm no one else was around. After confirming, he got closer to inspect the man. When he got closer, he noticed it was a middle-aged man and he had a hole in his chest. The hole was already starting to rot. This was obviously the work of being attacked with poison. By the side of the man was a pouch. From its shape, Gray deduced a fruit was inside. He picked it up and opened it slowly. The moment a little part of it was opened, thick essence immediately spilled out of the small opening. Gray quickly closed it. What pure and thick essence! This is definitely a treasure. Gray was ecstatic. This must be the reason this man was killed. I better leave now since his killers wouldn't be far. He immediately kept the pouch in his backpack and ran from the place. He used lightning steps while also enhancing himself with the wind element to further increase his speed. Not too long after Gray left, an old man walked out of the trees. I felt the energy coming from this place. He looked around before seeing the corpse on the floor. I knew he wouldn't be able to get far. I spent over half of my savings to get my hands on that poison, all for this. He laughed with elation as he walked towards the corpse. After getting close to the corpse, he started searching the corpse for what he wanted. Where is it? He exclaimed with disbelief. It was clearly with him after we managed to escape. He started looking around the area to see if he could find the pouch. He couldn't find it. He continued searching like a madman, but still, he couldn't find it. Gray, who had already run far away from the location, heard a loud roar. It was a roar that was filled with anger. He knew it must be from the person who killed the man, or maybe an accomplice of the man. He didn't care who roared and didn't want to know either. He fastened his speed and bolted out of the inner regions of the forest towards the outer regions. He wanted to find a secluded spot there before using the fruit. With this, I should be able to break through to the late stages of the arcane plane, he said with elation in his heart. 2 days later, Gray could be seen swaggering out of the mountain with a pleasant smile on his face. He didn't think it would take him this long to completely absorb the essence in the fruit. With the amount of essence in the fruit, he should have at least broken through to the 8th stage or even the 9th stage of the arcane plane. But surprisingly, he was able to only break through to the 6th stage. From this, one could see just how terrifying the amount of essence he would need for future breakthroughs. Gray noticed after getting the wind element, although his absorption speed increased, the amount of essence he needed also increased. When Gray used spiritual energy to inspect himself, he saw his essence orb had 3 different colors. The additional color was from getting the wind element. Lightning took the majority of the orb, while earth followed, with the wind element getting the minority. Each elementalist has an essence orb in their bodies where they store up their essences. Dual elementalists' orbs only contain 2 colors, which are the colors of both elements they wield. Single elementalist orbs only have a single color. Gray could tell he wasn't far from breaking through to the 7th stage. This has been a fruitful journey all round, he smiled to himself as he headed towards Willow City. Just like the previous time he came here, the city was as busy as always with people entering and exiting it. There were a lot of trade caravans that were being brought into the city. He didn't stay idle. He walked towards a restaurant to drink some tea before he returns. He overheard the conversation of some people at the restaurant. The battle at the Misty Mountain was brutal. Most of the arcane plane elementalists who went to the valley where the treasure appeared died. The ones who escaped were lucky. I heard the treasure was a fruit from a tree. Yeah, the tree only had 2 fruits in it. After the stone lion took one of them, it wisely left the last one so the rest of the people and beasts could struggle over it. It truly is cunning. It knew the others would think of the risk of engaging with it and decide to fight for the other fruit which was left behind. Gray was surprised by their conversations. So the treasure was a fruit. I wonder if it has anything to do with the one I found, he thought to himself. As the conversation of the men went on, he found out that the second fruit was acquired by 2 people, an old man and a middle-aged man. They teamed up and were able to escape successfully with the fruit. When he heard all this, he knew the fruit he found was most likely the treasure. Since they successfully escaped, that means the man was attacked after their escape. There are only 2 possibilities for the man's death: either he was attacked by his partner, or they were attacked, deduced Gray. From all the clues he was picking out, he was already over 70% sure the fruit he found was the treasure they all battled for. He, I didn't even do anything, yet the treasure came to me, he laughed in his heart. If the people around found out someone acquired the treasure without even fighting for it, they would be dumbfounded. Gray paid for his tea before heading out to get a horse he'll use for his journey. Since he was rich now, there was no way he was going to walk back the same way he came. He bought a high-quality horse and also some food he'll eat on the way. Morning of the second day. A horse was galloping along the path that leads to the Lunar Academy. Gray sat on top of the horse with a calm and steady presence. It's surprising how just a few days could change a person. I'm finally back, Gray said as he looked at the majestic gate in front of him. He got off the horse and went into the academy on foot. As he entered the academy, he felt like he only went out yesterday. He first headed towards the mission hall to submit his mission. When he got there, the student he saw was different from the one who handed out the mission to him. He submitted the mission and collected the reward before heading towards the student's living quarters. Gray decided to visit Klaus before heading to his house, but when he got there, Klaus wasn't at home. Maybe he went to the city, he assumed, and walked towards his house. He planned on visiting Reynolds after he settled down. When he got home, it was just like he had left it. Only it was dusty. He decided to clean it before heading over to Reynolds' place. After he was done, he went over to Reynolds' place. Luckily, he found him at home. "Hey Ray," called out Gray as he walked into the house. "Gray, you're back," Reynolds said as he walked towards his friend and gave him a hug. "Yeah," answered Gray after managing to break free from the clutches of his friend. "How was your mission?" Reynolds asked as he sat down. It was a piece of cake. Gray sat down beside his friend. Gray asked about what had happened since he went out of the academy. He found out the fighting between the Starlight Academy students and the Lunar Academy students had intensified. The students of the Lunar Academy started retaliating when they found out about the attacks their students faced. The Emperor summoned the principal of both academies to resolve the issue. Although both academies' students had stopped attacking each other, they knew it was only for the time being. Gray asked if Blake had returned to his office. Thankfully, he had returned. He decided to go see him after leaving Reynolds' place. When he asked Reynolds about the whereabouts of Klaus, it was just as he had predicted. Klaus was at Lunar City. Gray stayed there for some time before heading over to Blake's office. He still didn't know why Chris wanted to see him after he had broken through to the arcane plane. When he got to the office, he knocked. After some time, he heard Blake's voice telling him to enter before he went inside. Blake looked at him for some time. He could tell Gray was different from the last time he saw him. "What can I help you with?" asked Blake. "Senior Chris told me to come find you after I broke through to the arcane plane. He said I should tell you to take me to him." Gray stated his reason for coming. "Oh, come with me." After hearing it had to do with Chris, he stood up quickly and walked out of the office. Gray followed him. Soon they were at the gate of the academy. He was surprised when Blake took him outside the academy. They headed towards the back of the academy, just past where Gray usually does his training. They soon got to a huge rock. Blake made some seals and struck a spot on the rock. A path opened and they walked inside. Gray had seen this rock before but didn't think it was something important. Who would investigate every rock he sees? In the valley ahead of them, Chris was sitting on a chair with his eyes closed. The griffin which brought Gray here could be seen not too far from him. When they went closer, the griffin raised its head and looked over. After seeing it was Blake and Gray, it dropped its head and continued its nap. "You're finally here," Chris suddenly spoke up. "What took you so long?" "From my deductions, you should have broken through 2 weeks ago," he added. "I did break through 2 weeks ago, Senior. It's just I couldn't find Instructor Blake to bring me here," Gray explained. Chris darted a glance at Blake, waiting for an explanation. Blake dropped his head embarrassed. "That was the time I went over to the water hall." Chris didn't ask any further since he knew what happened. He suddenly raised his brow and looked at Gray. After careful observation, "How did you advance so fast?" he asked in a surprised voice. Gray was surprised by how quickly Chris was able to notice his breakthrough even without him releasing his aura. He had to applaud Chris's sharp senses. Even Blake didn't take note. When Blake heard this, he looked at Gray with interest. "I was lucky to obtain a natural treasure when I went on a mission at the Misty Mountain." Gray told them what happened in the mountain, omitting the part he used that unknown state. "You're truly fortunate. You didn't even go to the treasure, it was brought to you," Blake said with envy. Gray's luck was amazing. "The Misty Mountain, you say?" Chris went into deep thoughts. "Did you tell anyone else about this?" Chris asked. "No," Gray answered. "Good, keep it that way. If anyone asks, just say it's a secret or tell a lie," Chris said offhandedly. "And you don't tell this to anyone," he looked at Blake. Blake nodded his head before leaving. Senior Chris, Gray called after seeing he hadn't said anything to him. "Yes. Do you live here?" Yes. I thought you lived at the academy? It's too noisy. Gray was left speechless by the answer. You call that place noisy? Due to the lack of students, the academy is just too big for the students. Even Gray feels it's too quiet since one rarely sees students around the area. Release your spiritual energy, Chris suddenly said. Gray raised his head and looked at him, surprised by his request. He didn't think too much and just did as he was told. A formless energy spread out with Gray at the middle. Gray looked at him with confusion. Do you want to be my student? Chris asked. Your student? Yes. Now answer, I don't have all day. Gray was surprised by it and didn't know how to reply. He knew Chris wasn't simple, and from the way Blake treated him, his status must be something else. Yes. Good. Now as your teacher, the first task I have for you is to make me lunch, Chris said as he pointed at a bunny by the side. Chris was happily eating the bunny he asked Gray to prepare for him. Having a student who knows how to make good meals really has its perks. Chris regretted not having a student sooner. If he had known, he would have just accepted Gray as a student the moment he came to the academy. Although he was interested in Gray, it was just from the fact that he felt it was quite amazing to experience both of Gray's tests. He started having thoughts of taking Gray as a student after he tasted Gray's cooking. This was the only way he could think of to get Gray to cook for him frequently. After he was done eating, do you know about arrays? Asked Chris. When Gray heard him mention arrays, he was suddenly reminded of the books he had read regarding arrays. Although there wasn't much information about them, this was not the first he heard about it. A little, replied Gray. Chris stood up and went into the cabin behind him. After some time, he came back out with a bunch of scrolls. He tossed them at Gray. This contains the basics of arrays. After reading this, you should have a good idea about it. Gray caught the scrolls before sitting down not too far from Chris and started reading the scrolls. After reading the introductions, Gray understood why Chris asked him to release his spiritual energy. Without strong spiritual energy, it was almost impossible to make arrays. The stronger your spiritual energy, the easier it is for you to make them. Gray didn't expect Chris was an array master, talk less of taking him as a student. He felt he was extremely lucky for Chris to choose him. If only he knew what made Chris take him as a student, he might probably faint from exasperation. While Gray was still reading the scrolls, Chris suddenly asked, Have you heard of inscribers? Gray thought for a while before shaking his head, no. Chris didn't seem surprised with Gray's reply, he only asked just to confirm. Although a lot of people knew about arrays, only a few knew about inscribers. Let me show you something, said Chris. He suddenly stretched out his and some fire arrows suddenly formed and struck the lake close to them. After that attack died down, a symbol suddenly appeared in the sky about 2 meters in diameter. Fire arrows suddenly rained down from the symbol. What is the difference between both attacks? Chris asked while looking at Gray. Gray thought for a while before responding, the second attack is faster and stronger than the first. Chris nodded. What I just did was air inscription. Although it's not very effective in a one-on-one fight since it takes time to inscribe the symbol, it's terrifying when it comes to attacking groups. You can make the range of the attack wider, and it also has a longer range, Chris explained. This is like a branch of arrays. Without in-depth knowledge of arrays, you won't be able to inscribe, Chris continued. I'll tell you more about it tomorrow, take these scrolls home and study them. Come tomorrow at the same time. Chris made a shooing gesture indicating for Gray to leave. Gray didn't stay any further and bid his farewell to his teacher before turning to head out. When he was about to walk past the passageway, he suddenly remembered something and turned back inside. What else? Chris asked on seeing Gray coming back. I don't know how to get past the rock if I want to come back tomorrow, Gray said. Oh, that. It's easy, just hit the spot which has a spiral shape on the lower left of the rock, Chris said. But I saw Instructor Blake making weird hand seals. Gray voiced his confusion. He remembered how Instructor Blake made complicated-looking hand seals before striking the rock. Haha, that's just to confuse people who try to sneak in here. Although anyone who is successful regrets it, Chris laughed. From the looks of it, someone might have been successful in entering the place but met misfortune afterwards. Okay, you can leave now. Don't disturb me. Chris chased Gray out after telling him how to get through the rock. Gray left the valley. After heading out, he searched for the spiral symbol on the lower left of the rock. Where it was located wasn't too low, it was located around the height of his chest. He carefully examined the rock and found there were different symbols on it. After examining the rock, he left intrigued by how this rock was the doorway to a valley. The rock was stuck in a mountain. Gray walked to the other side of the mountain but was unable to find the valley. It was fascinating to him. When he was in the valley, he could clearly see the sky. After contemplating for a while without being able to deduce a convincing method, he decided to let it be and head back to the academy. He headed towards Klaus' place after entering the academy, since he knew Klaus would be back by now. When Klaus heard someone barging into his house without knocking, he was about to fly off the handle. But when he heard the voice, his anger suddenly turned to joy as he hadn't seen his friend for 2 weeks now. Haha, I was just thinking of when you'd return. Klaus laughed happily as he got up to welcome his friend. They fist bumped before Gray went to take a sit. I came to your place after I returned, but you weren't at home. I guessed you must have gone to the city, said Gray. You know me too well, Klaus said with a laugh. Gray noticed his friend was in a happier mood than usual. Did something good happen? He couldn't help but ask. Haha, yes of course. Klaus laughed again. Gray chuckled when he saw his friend laughing. Do you remember Leanne? Klaus asked with a smile. That girl we met at the city gate? Gray asked to confirm if it was who Klaus was talking about. Yes, replied Klaus. What's up with her? Gray asked since he didn't know why his friend brought up her name. She's now my girlfriend, Klaus proudly declared. Gray stared wide-eyed at his friend. What about Danielle? Danny, Klaus sighed. We just weren't meant to be, he added. But you said you felt something special from her? Gray said, clearly confused about this whole relationship thing. I thought I did. But I suddenly felt she wasn't the 1 inch, Klaus said sadly. I was lost in the darkness of my little world, and then Leanne came in. She lit up my entire world. Klaus's sad face immediately turned into a smiling one. This was exactly what you said after breaking up with Trista and hooking up with Danielle, said Gray in exasperation. I know, but the feeling I get from Leanne penetrates deep into my very core, Klaus said, still grinning. The last time you said the feeling you got from Danielle penetrates deep into your skin. Now, the one you get from Leanne goes deep into your core. Gray felt a headache when he looked at his buddy who was grinning like an idiot. In 1 year, Klaus had already broken up with 9 different girls. Gray didn't know how their relationships even worked in the first place. He decided to just let it be, since talking more about wouldn't make a difference. After they fooled around for some time. Hey Gray, Klaus suddenly said. Gray raised his head to look at his friend. Do you know about the competition held among the academies every 5 years? Asked Klaus. No, I haven't heard about that. Gray shook his head. Klaus went on to tell Gray about the competition. The competition was held at Capital City, the city where the Emperor resides. It would be a contest among the students of each academy. The winners always receive some amazing rewards from the Emperor. People say the Emperor did this competition, so he would be able to know all the young talents in the Empire and build a solid relationship with them. No one truly knows the reason, but the competition is something that was always anticipated by the citizens since it was the only time the gates of the capital city would be open to all. There's still 3 months before the competition. I should be able to break through before then, Gray said confidently. The next morning, Gray got up early like always and went over for his physical training. After 2 hours of hard training, he went home for a bath before heading to the Lightning Hall. After leaving the Lightning Hall, he headed over to the library since he needed to practice new techniques. His current schedule was insane since now he barely even has time for any other thing apart from training. He headed over to meet with Chris for his array training. When he entered, he noticed the griffin was not in the valley. Chris came out of the cabin shortly after his arrival. Did you study the scrolls? Asked Chris. Not all of them, answered Gray. After leaving Klaus' place, he went over to Alice's place since she would probably attack him if she finds out he had returned and didn't visit her. He only started reading after his visits, but he was able to read most of the scrolls. Okay, you'll continue studying them, said Chris. But first and foremost, before you start studying, make me lunch, Chris added shamelessly. He got some chickens and pigs now, so there would be a variety of meats for Gray to choose from when making lunch. Gray was startled by his request again, but didn't think too much. He quickly made lunch for him before starting his study. 2 weeks passed in this manner. Gray would almost always do the same things. The only changes were when he would go to the Earth Hall or the Wind Hall. Although he was only a student of the Earth and Lightning Hall, he was free to head over to the Wind Hall anytime. The only problem was getting wind elemental techniques from the library, since he was only entitled to collecting only Earth and Lightning elemental techniques. Before taking techniques out of the library, the student will have to register it with their school ID. So there is no way for him to take an elemental technique that wasn't in his ID. He had gotten some benefits from going to the Wind Hall, but it didn't amount to much. Another 2 weeks went by without any change. Gray was already making good progress in his training with Chris. Although it's small, it was a good start. He had to read different scrolls for over 2 weeks before Chris felt he was ready to try out making small-scale arrays. He hasn't been able to hang out with his friends during this month. Klaus came over several times, but they didn't do anything fun since they only talked about a few things. What shocked Gray was the fact that Klaus was still with his girlfriend. He thought they would have already broken up since Klaus rarely stays up to the 1-month mark. He had sparring sessions with Alice, Reynolds, and Klaus. They were all surprised by how fast he had advanced. Now, only Alice was ahead of him in cultivation. She was already in the 8th stage of the arcane plane. Reynolds was in the same plane as he was. Klaus was lower by a single stage. The competition was a grand event for the students since they would get a chance to show their abilities to everyone in the Empire. Gray, who was about to head out, suddenly saw Alice, Reynolds, and Klaus walking towards his house. "Good thing we came early. Any later than this, and we would have missed him," Reynolds said. "We're heading to the city. Are you coming along?" asked Klaus. Before Gray could reply, Alice spoke up. "Why are you even bothering to ask him? Of course, he's coming with us," said Alice. Gray felt a headache. He was about to head over to the valley for his array training. "Sorry guys, I really can't go this time. I have to go train." "You said the same thing last time." The group all felt Gray trained too much. He rarely has time to go out and have fun. "You train too much. You should go out with us today," Alice said, walking towards Gray. "I really can't guys, sorry." Gray stood by his first answer. "Are you sure nothing can change your mind?" Alice asked with a grin. "Absolutely not," affirmed Gray. 30 minutes later, Gray and his friends could be seen passing through the gate of Lunar City. On the way, Klaus was still stunned by the scene that played out when Alice tried to persuade Gray. It seems Alice's definition of persuasion was to beat up the person until they agreed to her demands. At first, Gray managed to keep up with her, but after she got serious, Gray gave in. Reynolds and Klaus had already decided they would never allow Alice to persuade them for anything in this world. They gloated at Gray's misfortune. "Gray, so what changed your mind?" Reynolds asked for the 10th time while they were walking. When Klaus heard the question, he started laughing. Gray glared at them but refused to answer. He still felt pain in some parts of his body. He never expected Alice would use such methods. "Alice, I sincerely approve of your persuasion methods. If I ever want to get Gray out of his place, you're the one I'll take with me." Klaus gave Alice a thumbs up. "Anytime," Alice replied with a giggle. Gray looked at her with fearful eyes. She was a terrifying opponent. But he didn't really take it seriously. If it were to be a real battle, even though he knew he couldn't defeat Alice, he would definitely be able to escape given his speed. But he knew he also needed some time off from his daily training. He had been too focused on his training lately. They all joked and laughed as they walked into the city. Klaus suggested taking them to a place he newly discovered in the city. After walking for some time, they reached an old-looking building in a secluded part of the city. Klaus knocked on the door with a strange rhythm. The door was suddenly opened from the inside. Klaus told them to follow him as he walked inside. "What is this place?" Alice looked around with curious eyes. "You'll know once we get to our destination," Klaus said mysteriously. They walked deeper into the building. After passing a series of doors, they started hearing noises. After passing through the last door, the newcomers stood rooted on the spot. They were in what seems to be a huge arena, with 5 battle platforms at the center of the arena. People were cheering for the fighters on the platforms. They looked around and estimated there were over 3,000 people present here. "How did they even build this place?" Reynolds asked, dumbstruck. If he wasn't taken here, there was no way he would believe there was a place like this in the city. "I asked the same question you did the first time I came here. This is an underground fight club. A friend of mine brought me here about a year ago when I came to the city," Klaus said. They searched for a place to sit and watch the battles going on. Gray was surprised to see a student he had seen in the Wind Hall on the battle platforms. Gray pointed out his discovery to his friends. "Students from the academy come here to battle frequently since this is different from sparring with fellow students. Although deaths are a rare sight here, injuries are seen frequently," Klaus said. They all nodded. Gray hadn't had a real battle since leaving the Misty Mountain. Discovering this place was great for him. He could try out just how strong he had grown. After his previous breakthrough, he hadn't fought a satisfying battle since. While they were still discussing, one of the battles ended with the student from the Wind Hall suffering a defeat by a small margin. "How do they choose fighters?" asked Alice enthusiastically. "You can either register to have a battle or take up a challenge if a fighter puts up a challenge," Klaus explained. Alice listened intently. Gray also focused on the conversation since he also wanted to ask the same question. Before long, a fighter stood on stage and challenged anyone from the crowd on the same stage as him. He was at the 8th stage of the arcane plane. "This will be a good way to test myself," thought Gray, and charged towards the platform. Whoosh! A silhouette suddenly appeared on the platform. Gray, who was about to charge into the platform, stopped in his tracks. He looked at the silhouette who appeared on the platform and shook his head. Alice was faster in making a move. She stood on the platform with an excited look. The crowd was surprised when they saw a little girl get on stage, but they couldn't deny the fact that she was pretty fast. "Little girl, this isn't a place for you," the man who made the challenge said towards Alice. Alice looked at him without bothering to reply. She turned towards the man in charge of the platform. The man didn't know if to allow the fight at first, since it would be dangerous for the little girl if her strength didn't reach the required level. He looked back to get a confirmation from the organizers. Only after they nodded their heads did he approve of the fight. The man looked at Alice again. "Seems like you're not so simple. For the organizers to agree to you battling me, but I should warn you before we start, I don't hold back even when my opponent is a little girl." Only after seeing that the battle would go on, did the crowd know the little girl should be able to protect herself. But they weren't too optimistic about her chances of winning. "Begin," the man in charge called for the start of the battle. The man attacked with a huge water snake immediately after the battle started. Lightning crackled on Alice's hand before she sent a huge sword made out of lightning towards the water snake. The sword cut through the snake before heading towards the man. Seeing this, the man made a wall of ice which successfully blocked the lightning sword. They continued exchanging moves back and forth. The crowd was awed by the strength Alice was displaying. Even the man didn't expect the little girl to be this strong. A glint flashed through his eyes as he started attacking more aggressively. "I pity him," said Gray suddenly towards his friends. Reynolds nodded also, since he felt the same way. "Why did you say that?" Klaus asked. If he had continued attacking with his previous style, although he would still lose given Alice's strength, she wouldn't beat him up too much. Reynolds was the one who spoke up this time. From the man's attack, you could tell his grade is only orange. This has given Alice the first advantage since her attack power is stronger. If the man was battling some other students on the same plane, he has an 8 out of 10 chance of being victorious due to his experience. But Alice is totally different. She's a battle maniac who enjoys fighting. She already has a great amount of experience from the multiple life and death battles she has engaged in when on a mission. Alice could barely find an opponent in the same stage as her. Gray and Reynolds had spent the most time with her, so they knew her well. The only reason the battle was still ongoing was just her seeking to enjoy a prolonged battle. Alice's attacks suddenly started getting stronger. She wasn't using her full strength previously. The man was shocked in his heart and couldn't help but start sweating. He had already used all his strength, but Alice was able to destroy his attacks. At first, he thought she was already at her end and was planning on how she would make a mistake he could capitalize on. The crowd was excited when they saw how spectacular the battle was turning out to be. They all felt lucky being able to watch such an intense battle. They prayed the battle would go on for longer. Only the experienced ones knew the battle would come to an end soon, since one of the fighters is already on his last leg. "That girl is strong," a shocked man said towards his partners. They nodded in response. Alice suddenly made a move that scared the hell out of her opponent. A huge wall made of fire suddenly sprang up around her opponent. They had been battling for some time now, and Alice had only used the lightning element for her attacks. The sudden appearance of the fire wall scared and stunned him. He literally thought someone was interfering with the fight, but he knew no one would do that since they all knew the rules of the place. She's a dual elementalist. He felt more fear. Whenever he thought Alice had showed her true power, she would surprise him with something stronger. The walls limited the area he could move. This wasn't the scariest part of it all. What truly scared him was the makeshift roof the firewalls had. When he looked up, all he could see was a sea of lightning which perfectly fit on top of the firewalls. The people outside suddenly saw a hut made of red and silver color appeared with a man stuck inside. "Dual elementalists," they all said simultaneously. It was rare for a dual elementalist to appear here, especially someone so talented. "Checkmate," Alice said with a smile. The man who was about to attack and break through the firewalls suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He raised his head and saw what looked like lightning spears coming out of the roof. When he looked at the walls, he saw the same thing happening, only this time it was fire spears. His legs suddenly went soft, and he dropped to the ground. "I give up," he yelled at the top of his lungs to make sure the man in charge heard him clearly. The crowd was surprised by the terrified shout they heard. Alice pouted when she heard the man say this. "You're no fun. You didn't even try to block the attack," she complained while first extinguishing the walls and the roof. The crowd suddenly felt their eyes nearly jumped out of their heads. Even Gray and his friends were stupefied by the sight. Did she plan on killing him? Klaus couldn't help but ask in a fearful voice. The man was shaking on the floor with lightning and fire spears surrounding him from all angles. They floated on the same spot for some time before, just like the walls, they extinguished. Had he been a little slower in admitting defeat, he would have definitely died from that attack. The crowd looked at the little girl in horror. They all knew there was no way the man could have been able to block that attack. Even some people at the 9th stage of the arcane plane among the crowd were not confident they could block it. The man stood up with shaky legs. "Thank you," he said towards Alice before he pulled himself together and managed to walk away from the platform. He wasn't stupid. If it were to be a life and death battle, Alice would have attacked sooner and not do everything slowly. He knew she was giving him a chance by taking her time to create the attack. If he was confident in blocking it, then he would take the attack head-on, but if he wasn't, he could always admit defeat. Alice stood at the platform even after the man had left. She clearly wanted to challenge others as well. After the man in charge of the platform issued the challenge, no one stepped up. Even after 5 minutes, no one dared to step up. The man had to tell Alice to return since no one wanted to battle her and more battles were still supposed to take place. Alice left the platform dejectedly and walked towards her friends. She was clearly disappointed by the lack of opponents. Gray suddenly smacked his head. "Hey buddy, do they make bets here?" he asked Klaus. Of course, before each battle starts, a betting pool would be open for the two fighters, Klaus explained to Gray. "Damn," Gray said when he heard this. If only he had remembered this sooner, he would have bet his entire savings on Alice. He could have made a fortune. "What a waste," he complained. Alice sat down close to them, still in a sad mood. "That attack of yours is not easy to pull off," Klaus said towards her. "Not really, but it's still quite taxing to use it since you have to manipulate two elements at the same time." "It's getting easier for me now compared to when I first learned it," replied Alice. Gray confirmed what she said since he had also tried using two elements simultaneously. He had even tried using three. Although it's taxing, once you get the hang of it, it becomes easier. It's like multitasking yourself. Once you get used to it, it becomes simple. After some time, Gray later went on to battle. Just like Alice, he calmly defeated his opponent. But unlike Alice, he was able to have another battle. Since both Gray and Alice had participated in the battling, Klaus and Reynolds felt left out, so they also participated. Klaus won his first battle, but lost the second one to an elementalist who was 2 stages higher than him. After leaving the place, they walked into the city and did different fun things before heading back to the academy after sunset. On their way back to the academy, Klaus opted to stay behind. He wanted to see his girlfriend. The group left the city without him and headed back to the academy. They all knew they had to train harder since the competition will be taking place within the next 2 months. Gray started cultivating immediately after getting home. He could feel his breakthrough was just around the corner. After breaking through to the late stages of the arcane plane, his strength would increase once again. The next day, Gray's usual routine started, waking up early for his physical training before choosing to head to the Earth Hall today. After that, he went over for his array training. Immediately after he got into the valley, the first thing he did was head straight towards the farm. Chris surprisingly made a small place where the chickens, pigs, and bunnies were kept. Since Chris always asks him to prepare lunch before his training starts, he decided to prepare the meal immediately after entering to save Chris the stress of asking. When he was done with the meal, he started his training. "Why didn't you come yesterday?" Chris asked while he was still eating. "I was about to come, but Klaus, Reynolds, and Alice asked me to go with them to the city. Since I have been too busy with my training recently, I decided to take a break and go with them," Gray explained. "You shouldn't train too hard, create some time for yourself," Chris said. He knew all about Gray's tight schedule with his training. "Do you plan on participating in the competition?" Chris suddenly asked. Yes, Gray nodded. This was the first competition he would take part in. He wanted to know how he would fare when placed among the younger generations. Good, Chris nodded in approval. He knew Gray would definitely want to participate in it. "Your stage is still too low, you shouldn't have a problem breaking into the 7th stage before the competition. But you should be prepared because those who would participate in this competition are the best in their academy. Some are even more terrifying than that little lass you hang out with," Chris advised. Gray knew what he said was correct. Although he could fight across stages, he wasn't the only one. Alice could do the same without any problem. But this also made him more determined on participating in the competition. Battling with young geniuses would tell him just how far behind he was. This would be a new boost for him to grow quicker and better. "Set up the defensive array you have been practicing," said Chris. He wanted to see the progress Gray had made so far. Gray nodded and got to work. He carefully used his spiritual energy to guide the lightning element in the air and started making patterns on the ground. After 2 hours, he was done with the defensive array. The array only covered a diameter of 3 meters. This was the largest he could make currently. He activated it, and the array lit up. A translucent thin light came out from the array. It had strange lines on it with lightning flickering around it. This array also had attacking properties. If it was touched by anyone, the lightning would immediately attack. It was a special property the lightning element gave it. The lightning element is mainly focused on attack, so even when made into a defensive array, it still had the unique attacking property. Chris nodded. He could tell Gray was improving at a very fast rate. This attributed to how focused Gray was in his training. Gray's speed of learning wasn't the best among all the people he knew, but the amount of time Gray puts into his training was insane. This was the edge he had over others. His learning speed wasn't bad, it was just above average. Coupled with his hard-working nature, it wasn't surprising he was advancing at this speed. Brown, Chris called out to the Griffin. Brown raised her head to look at Chris. Break the array, Chris pointed at the array. Brown got up with and steadily walked towards the array. After getting to the front of the array, she raised one of her talons and poked at it. Just like a shattered dream, the array came crumbling down. Gray stood stunned in the array. He didn't expect something he put so much time into preparing was destroyed just like that. Brown looked at Gray in disdain, her eyes clearly asking, "You call this an array? That came out wrong. You were supposed to try out the strength of the array." Chris said with a light, embarrassed laugh. Gray just stood still. He still couldn't believe what happened. Chris looked at him and laughed. "Don't be discouraged. She only struck the weak link of the array, that was why it broke so easily." Chris comforted him. Brown is knowledgeable about arrays, so breaking an array with the weak link was normal for her. She wouldn't be able to break the array a master set so easily, since it would be hard to find its weak link. After hearing what Chris said, Gray was able to figure out the rest. Without proficient knowledge of arrays, there was no way she would know where the weak link was located. It seems she is even more knowledgeable about arrays than he was. Gray took a short break since making arrays was taxing on his spiritual energy. Only after getting sufficient rest did he make the array once again. This time, Chris made sure to remind Brown to test out the strength of the array. Brown did as ordered and attacked the array. Her first attack wasn't too strong. When it hit the array, the lights dimmed a little but shone after some time. She increased the strength before attacking it again. When the second attack hit it, cracks appeared on the array. The cracks increased before the array fell apart. Not bad. The current strength of it could withstand the attack of a third-stage arcane plane elementalist. Chris acknowledged the strength of the array. Gray felt the same way when he made the array, so the confirmation from Chris proves his senses were right. The strength of the array would increase as he improves in the act. After staying in the valley for another hour, he went back home and started practicing the new techniques he took from the library. When he was done with his practice, he started cultivating. He only entered the chaos space after cultivating. Gray's schedule was exactly the same every day. He rarely had time to visit his friends. Klaus was the first among them to make a breakthrough. He was able to break through to the 6th stage of the arcane plane 1 week later. Gray and Alice made a breakthrough after another 2 weeks. The time of the competition was getting closer by the day. When it was 1 month left before the competition, the Empire announced the quotas for each academy. The students were all surprised by the number of students participating from each academy. Even the citizens were also shocked. Normally, the number of spots each academy had has always been 15. But for this competition, it was suddenly increased by 10. They all figured something must be going on for the sudden increase in numbers. With an increased number of spots, the competition would be fierce. Each student would want to grab a spot from their academy, so they could participate. Most of the students rejoiced since they would get an opportunity to grab a spot. After the quota was announced, the Lunar Academy also announced how the spots were to be given. 14 spots had already been taken by the students in the 9th stage of the arcane plane. A tournament would be held to determine the remaining 11 spots. The tournament was to be held in 2 weeks. The entire academy was immediately filled with activity. Each student wanted to progress before the tournament, so they could participate in the competition. Fighting in the competition platform was a dream for most of the students, since only the best students get the chance to fight there. The days moved faster, and soon it was time for the tournament. The academy advised only those at the late stages of the arcane plane should participate in the tournament, but if any student felt they were strong enough, they could also take part in it. Reynolds was able to break through to the 7th stage of the arcane plane just before the day of the tournament, giving him increased confidence in his chances of obtaining a spot for the competition. Finally, the day the students were all waiting arrived. It was the day of the tournament. The arena of the Lunar Academy was filled with the little students they had. This tournament would decide the remaining 11 spots for the competition. Gray hadn't battled with anyone from the academy except for Alice, Reynolds, and Klaus. He was quite expectant towards the students of the academy. He knew almost all the students of the academy were talented due to the strict rules of the academy. The rules for other academies were less rigid, but it didn't change the fact that the other academies also had talented individuals. The Starlight isn't the publicly acclaimed #1 for nothing. they had won the previous 2 competitions comfortably. But this time, the Lunar Academy seems to have more geniuses compared to the previous times. During the last competition, the Starlight Academy had 3 people in the top 10. That was the highest number of students a single academy had in the top 10 in the history of the competition. The Lunar Academy grabbed 2 spots in the previous competition, with both students being in the top 7, one was placed second while the other was 7th. The academy aims for the top spot, but the Starlight Academy wouldn't be that easy to defeat. Gray and his friends came to the arena. Alice also came to watch to support her friends who were participating. She would love it if they all could participate in the competition, so she came to cheer them up. When Gray and his friends went to register, they were each given plaques with numbers on them. Since they registered at the same time, their numbers were close. Gray's plaque had the number 55, while Klaus had 54, Reynolds had 56. The number of students registering was still increasing. Soon an instructor came to the platform. All the students ceased their conversations on seeing the instructor on stage. The registration has ended. Now each student who registered for the tournament should come towards the platform, the instructor said in a clear and resonant voice. All the participating students got up from their seats and walked towards the platform. 107 students are participating. The tournament would last for 10 days, with 20 battles taking place each day, the instructor said. One student will be exempted from this first round since we can only have 53 battles in the first round. The student who has plaque number 1 will battle the student with plaque number 107, number 2 would battle number 106, and so on, the instructor continued. The student with the plaque number 54 would advance automatically into the next round. After this round is finished, those who advanced will get new plaque numbers. The students all knew their numbers. Some of them started searching for who their potential opponents were. When Klaus heard the student with the plaque number 54 advanced automatically, he was over the moon with joy. Reynolds looked at him with envy. Even Gray couldn't help but click his tongue at his luck. Gray was supposed to be the first one to register, but Klaus jumped in front of him and therefore collected the lucky number, as it seems. The instructor ordered them all to step down from the platform. There were 4 platforms in the arena altogether, and battles would take place on each of them simultaneously. The students with plaque numbers 1 to 4 and plaque numbers 107 to 104 all stood opposite their opponents on the platforms. Remember to give up once you feel you can't deal with the attack of your opponent. This is not a life and death battle, so there is no need to endure till your last breath. Although we encourage your courage, it doesn't mean you should get yourself killed. Once you see your opponent can no longer fight back, you are not allowed to continue attacking. After your opponent admits defeat, you are not allowed to attack them. Are we clear? The instructor asked after telling them the rules. Yes. The fighters answered together. All right, begin. The instructor nodded his head before leaving the platform and going to the side. He would step in immediately any of the students is in danger. Instructors were also assigned to the other 3 platforms. After they were all ready, the battles commenced. Gray and his friends decided to stay and watch the battles. There would be 20 battles today, and they weren't among the fighters. Watching the battles of others was a good way to also learn. The students who weren't participating in the tournament because of their low levels were all watching the battles with interest. They were all excited at the thought of the battles since they all enjoyed watching battles. There would be 5 sets of battles taking place today on all 4 platforms, which would make a total of 20 battles for the day. They sat till the 3rd set of battles before Gray decided to leave. Since he wouldn't be participating in any of the battles for today, he wanted to train. He first headed over to meet with Chris. He practiced for 2 hours before heading to his house to continue his training. They watched the battles on the second day as well, but didn't stay till the end. Klaus was more carefree among them since he didn't have to battle in this round. The next day, Gray and his friends came to the arena early. He still didn't know his opponent and didn't really care. Whoever stood in his way, he would storm past them. There were only 13 battles left for this round to come to a close, and Gray's battle was the last battle. Reynolds would be battling before Gray did. He would be part of the 3rd set to battle today. Gray and his opponent would be the only ones in the 4th set. Do you know who you're fighting? Asked Reynolds. Gray shook his head. I don't. How about you? Do you know who you're fighting? He. I'm quite lucky. My opponent is Larry from the Fire Hall. He's at the 6th stage of the Arcane Plane, so I shouldn't have a problem defeating him. Reynolds scratched his head before answering. Although he said this, he knew he shouldn't underestimate his opponent. When he was in the 6th stage, he didn't have a problem with battling those at the 7th stage. Even if he couldn't beat them, he wasn't totally helpless against them. Gray nodded when he heard this. Getting to battle someone at the 6th stage wasn't challenging for him. He didn't believe anyone in a lower stage than he was could defeat him. Yes, he was that confident. Don't dare return here if you don't advance to the next round. I mean, look at me, I've already advanced. I am too awesome that my opponent had to admit defeat even before seeing me, Klaus said shamelessly. Yes, I agree with him, Alice added. Gray and Reynolds glared at Klaus. Lucky bastard, they said simultaneously. He, you don't have to feel bad. As long as you decide to follow me for the rest of your lives, I could allow you to rub off some of my awesomeness. If you guys were awesome just by a little bit, you wouldn't have a problem getting a girlfriend, Klaus laughed loudly. Alice also joined in the laughing when she heard this. If looks could kill, then Klaus would have already died 10 times by now with the way Gray and Reynolds were glaring at him. While they were bantering, it soon got to Reynolds' turn to head towards the platform. After this set of battles, it would be Gray's turn. Make sure to win, Alice said. Of course, I can't bring shame to our group, right? Reynolds asked with a smile as he walked confidently towards the platform. Both fighters on the platform majored in the offensive, their elements were focused mainly on attacking, so it was going to be an interesting battle. The battle soon started and Reynolds charged towards his opponent before sending an orb made of lightning towards his opponent. When the orb got within 10 feet of his opponent, it immediately exploded and sent lightning towards him. On seeing the attack, Larry didn't panic and used a sea of flames to block out the attack. He knew there was no way he could match up to Reynolds in terms of speed, so he had to keep a cool head and defended calmly. The battle went on for some time and Reynolds couldn't find a chance to deal a strong attack on Larry. He didn't rush and took his time. He knew just like how he was searching for an opportunity, his opponent was also doing the same. Their battle was the most intense one among all the battles which were taking place. It was as spectacular as it was colorful due to the series of attacks from both fighters. Larry is cool-headed. If he were to be in the same stage as Reynolds, he would have won already, said Klaus. You're not totally right, you should know Reynolds by now, Gray said. If Reynolds failed to defeat his opponent with his first flurry of attacks, he would immediately change his strategy to something better suited for his opponent. While they were still talking, Larry suddenly screamed in pain before collapsing on the floor, shaking violently. The crowd was surprised by the sudden change. They were all enjoying the battle and Larry suddenly screamed and collapsed. Reynolds immediately stopped his attack, he smiled and walked out of the platform. Others might not know what happened, but he knew. Over the course of his flurry of attacks, he was carefully leaving behind little lightning elements on the air in the platform. If his opponent focused intently, they might be able to sense the disturbance in the surrounding elements. But due to the high intensity of their fight, Larry didn't notice it. The elements attached themselves to Larry. After it got to the required amount where it could totally incapacitate his opponent without killing him, he activated them. Reynolds win, the instructor announced the result. Reynolds walked towards his friends confidently. How was it? He asked. Not bad, your strategy was amazing, even I wouldn't notice it, Gray said. He was stunned by the attack his friend used. Although it took time, it was very effective. They all laughed before the instructor called out the last battle. Next up, plaque number 53 and 55. They're calling me, I'll be back soon. Gray stood up and calmly headed towards the platform with calm and confident footsteps. Good luck, Klaus said. Yeah, luck. A little smile formed on his face. Gray stood calmly on the platform and stared at his opponent. He couldn't help but sigh with disappointment. His opponent was a girl from the Wind Hall. Gray had seen her some of the times he had attended classes there. Although they weren't friends, they were still acquainted. She was in the 7th stage of the arcane plane, but there was no way she was an opponent for Gray. Although he was disappointed, he didn't show it out, so it wouldn't feel like he was looking down on her. Hello, she said towards Gray. Hello, Gray waved at her with a smile. Begin, the instructor said after both fighters got on the platform. Please go easy on me, the girl said gently before using a movement technique to try to attack Gray with the element of surprise. When she appeared beside Gray and sent out an attack, Gray suddenly disappeared from where he stood and appeared on the other side of the platform. He looked at his opponent calmly with a smile still plastered on his face. The girl sent another attack towards Gray, but just like before, Gray was able to easily evade all the attacks. The girl went on attacking with Gray easily dodging them. You should just give up, Gray said with a sigh. He had already gotten a lot of chances to end the battle, but he didn't want her to feel bad if the battle ended too quickly. The girl looked at him and bit her lower lips. From this little exchange, she knew she wasn't an opponent for Gray. But she didn't want to give up without even trying harder. No, she shook her head stubbornly. Okay, Gray answered before disappearing from her view once again. There was no need to extend the fight any longer. He had already allowed her to show some of her abilities. The sooner he ends this, the quicker he could start training for today. Earth spikes suddenly came out of the ground. The girl immediately jumped upwards in a bid to dodge the attack. While she was still airborne, Gray appeared behind her and struck her on the neck. Since she was a student from the academy, he didn't want to hurt her. She was surprised by the sudden appearance of Gray behind her. Before she could think of a way to maneuver, she suddenly blacked out. Gray caught the unconscious girl so she wouldn't hurt herself before handing her over to the instructor. The instructor nodded when he saw Gray's conduct. It was clean and effective. He could tell Gray was not like most of the students from how he fought. Gray must have engaged in different life and death battles. After handing her to the instructor, Gray walked out of the platform. It was like he didn't even take part in the fight that just took place. Only the students at the 8th stage could excite him a little, but he wasn't sure they could make him go all out. Only those at the 9th stage were the ones he regarded as his true opponents. If not for wanting to take part in the competition, he would have just focused on his training and not bother himself with all this. All the students who advanced should come to the platform, the instructor called out. Since there was still time, the students would receive their new numbers today, so they could know the order of fighting tomorrow. All 54 students stood on the platform. There were 53 battles during the first round. Half of the students advanced while the other half were eliminated. Klaus got an automatic advancement that made them 54 students in total who made it to the second round. Since the number of students tally, all students would fight in this round, the instructor explained before bringing out a big box which was filled with plaques. The students already knew they would all battle after they did the calculations. Come forward and pick a plaque, the instructor said. The numbers were placed randomly, so there was no way the students could choose who they wanted to fight with. The first person went over to pick a plaque, the others followed in an orderly manner. Soon all the plaques had been taken. Just like the first round, the student with plaque number 1 would battle number 54 and so on. There would be 20 battles each day just like the last round also, the instructor said before dismissing the students. What number did you get? Klaus curiously. I'm 43, said Gray. I'm 14, said Reynolds. I'm 6, luckily you guys won't have to face me, Klaus said with a smile. After leaving the arena, Gray headed over to the valley. He was looking forward to his training today since Chris told him he could start learning inscription today. The thought of learning inscription excited him. Even though it was slower, its attack power was higher. Besides, as he continues training in it, the time it would take would decrease, till it will become almost instantaneous. When he got to the valley, he went to prepare the meal they would all eat. He joins Chris most of the time when he was eating. Even Brown has grown to like the food Gray cooked. So she was always excited whenever he came. Over the period Gray had been coming, he had formed a close relationship with Brown. Chris always eats before he starts teaching Gray. How was your battle today? Chris asked after they were done eating. It was disappointing. Gray shook his head. Why did you say that? Chris asked curiously. Although my opponent is not weak, she's not really my match. Gray told Chris what happened. You shouldn't have an equal in the same stage. I don't think those in the 8th stage can also pose a threat to you. Your real opponents are those in the 9th stage, Chris said. Gray nodded. He also felt that way. But there are some people in the 8th stage who are terrifying. They are very rare though, Chris added. I know, said Gray. If he broke through to the 8th stage, he would also be regarded as one of those terrifying ones, if not even stronger. Good, now to the business of today. I would teach you the basics of inscribing. Since you already have a good foundation in arrays, it shouldn't really be too hard for you to do. Chris went on to teach Gray how to inscribe. It's just like making an array, only quicker, and it's done on the air, Gray said. Yes. Now that you know the basics, with your knowledge of arrays, you shouldn't have a problem with it. Chris went back to his chair. Since he had already shown Gray what to do, all he had to do was watch Gray practice and correct him if he makes any mistakes. Gray followed Chris' instructions and tried inscribing but failed. It was within his expectations, as he didn't think he would be able to make it immediately. He continued with his practice. Although he was failing, from his failure he was able to get more experience with inscribing. After staying till sunset, Gray headed home. He was unable to inscribe, but he had made some progress nonetheless. He did his usual training after getting home before going to bed. Since he would be battling tomorrow, he wanted to be in his best condition. Hopefully, he gets a worthy opponent. The next morning, they all gathered at Gray's place before heading towards the arena. When they got to the arena, just like before, students were already there to cheer on the fighters. After the instructors arrived, they immediately called for the students to start the second round. The first set of battles began heatedly. In one of the platforms, 2 students at the 8th stage of the arcane plane were battling. It was totally unexpected since the number of students in the 8th stage was few. Due to how random each of the fights is, students in the 8th stage also battled during the first round. Now in the second round, they were also battling. The students in the 8th stage who were eliminated would be unlucky since there are students they were stronger than. But this had nothing to do with the academy. Although they wanted to take their best students there, they still couldn't act unfairly. Besides, without competent abilities, it would be impossible to advance. The battle was very tight, but just like all battles in a tournament, there was a winner. The student from the Earth Hall was able to beat the one from the Fire Hall. After the first round of battles, the second round began. Klaus would take part in the second round of the battle. It was the first time he was going to fight, and he couldn't help but be excited. His opponent was from the Water Hall just like him but was one stage higher than him. Among the group, Klaus was the one who was the most playful, but they all knew deep down, he was just as hardworking as they were. Klaus could also battle across stages, so the result of the battle was unknown. After a long fight, Klaus was able to clinch victory. He was nearly defeated a couple of times, but he managed to pull through and win. It was Gray's turn the next set, and just like the last time, he got someone who was at the 7th stage. The only difference was his opponent was a boy from the Water Hall. How disappointing! Gray sighed in his heart as he looked at his opponent. He didn't waste his time and ended the battle quickly since he had to go practice. Reynolds came up and also won his battle against a student at the 7th stage of the Arcane Plane. The student was from the Earth Hall, so he mostly focused on defense. Reynolds just bombarded him with a series of attacks until his opponent made a mistake from the pressure. After Reynolds' battle came to an end, the group exited the arena. Since they had already battled, they had no other reason to stay. They all wanted to go train and focus on the next task ahead. Gray headed to the valley to continue practicing inscribing. It wasn't going to be easy. The only way he could truly get the hang of it was through trying continuously. He failed, he tried again, he failed again, he tried again. The cycle went on till he went home. Even after getting home, he still continued with his practice. He could feel he wasn't too far away from making his first inscription. So he continued doing it even after the failed attempts. Since he wouldn't be having a battle tomorrow, he stayed up late because of his practice. The night passed with Gray still being unsuccessful. He managed to get up early, albeit tired. The pressure inscribing placed on spiritual energy was huge, and because he did it over again the previous day, he was exhausted. There is no way I can practice this today. Gray knew he was at his limit. If he tried to force himself, it would only be causing more harm than good. 20 battles took place yesterday, so today only 7 battles would be fought. After the battles, they would have to pick a new number. This was the reason Gray came. They didn't come to the arena on time though. By the time they arrived, the first set of battles were just rounding up. They found a seat and waited patiently for the second set to finish, so they could pick their new numbers and head back home. The second set soon started and they all watched the match. Gray was particularly lazy due to the stress of his training. He just wanted to head home and get some sleep. He wasn't confident he could even prepare a meal for Chris, so he decided to head home for a rest. After some time, the second round ended. The instructor once again stepped into the arena. All students who advanced should come to the platform, said the instructor. They all stood up from their respective seats and headed towards the platform. The number of students had reduced from 107 to a meager number of 27. Just like the first round, a student will get automatic advancement since there is an extra student. The student who picks plaque number 14 would gain automatic advancement. After saying this, he took out the box and placed it in front of him. Now step forward and pick a plaque, the instructor said. The plaques were all facing downwards, so there is no way for the students to know which one had the number 14. As they were lining up to go pick the plaques, Klaus wanted to get in front of Gray, but Reynolds immediately held him and pushed him towards his back and stepped in front of Gray. There was no way he was going to allow Klaus to do the same thing twice. They were the last 3 on the line, so they would get to pick the last 3 plaques. When Gray thought about the first incident, he also pushed Klaus behind him. Now Klaus was the last person on the line. He wouldn't even get a chance to choose which plaque he would like to pick. Although the picking was random, the chances of getting the plaque numbered 14 was much higher than when he had to pick the last plaque. Klaus complained when he saw how they were acting, but no matter how much he talked to them, they refused to let him be ahead of them. Soon it was the last 3 plaques. Reynolds was the first to step up, and he picked one of the plaques. Gray followed and picked another one, leaving the last one for Klaus. Klaus grumbled under his breath as he walked over to pick the plaque. This round's battles are arranged in the same order as the previous round. Since there are only 13 battles, all the battles will take place tomorrow, the instructor said before walking out of the arena. On his way out, he suddenly turned and asked, "Which student has the number 14? All the students looked at their plaques, with none stepping forward. Gray and Reynolds also looked at their plaques and shook their heads with disappointment. They clearly did not get the lucky number. Klaus grumpily looked at his plaque. His facial expression suddenly changed. Gray noticed the sudden change in Klaus and couldn't help but take a peek at the plaque. His eyes opened wide when he saw the number 14 boldly written on it. Reynolds curiously looked at it also when he saw Gray's weird behavior. The result almost made him pass out from shock. Klaus stepped out and showed his plaque to the instructor. "You again," the shocked instructor said. He still remembered how Klaus also got the lucky number in the first round. Now in the third round, he also acquired it. The shocking part was the fact that the plaque he picked was the last plaque there. The surrounding students were also surprised since they knew Klaus was the one who also got the automatic advancement during the first round. The eyes they all used to look at him was filled with envy. Not fighting means he is already so close to obtaining a spot at the competition. Klaus smiled and nodded. When Klaus stepped forward, Reynolds edged closer to Gray and asked with a whisper. Gray slapped Reynolds at the back of his head when he heard this question. "I only asked a question," Reynolds whined. "He was just lucky," said Gray. Klaus was lucky, too lucky even. For him to be able to consecutively get the automatic advancement twice in a row was unbelievable. "Too lucky if you ask me," Reynolds stressed the first part of his sentence. Klaus returned confidently. He looked at Gray and Reynolds before laughing. They were the ones who pushed him to the last spot. They even picked before him, yet they surprisingly missed the plaque. They all headed back towards their seats to meet up with Alice before leaving.
"How did it go?" asked Alice.
"It went well," Klaus replied with a grin. "Oh, I saw you meeting with the instructor. Was there a problem?" the curious Alice asked. "It really isn't a problem per se. I got the automatic advancement." Klaus spoke like it was something normal. When Alice heard this, even she couldn't help but wonder how lucky Klaus was. Getting the automatic advancement twice in a row was something that had never happened in these sorts of tournaments before. "I'm just too awesome. Once again, my awesomeness scared my opponent into admitting defeat without even seeing me. You should learn from me. My lessons start at sunset every day. You should not miss it, especially you, Gray. You haven't hooked up with one girl since you came to the academy," Klaus said shamelessly. Gray glared at him when he heard the last part of the statement. Alice giggled when she heard this, and Reynolds couldn't help but chuckle. "I still haven't found the right one," Gray said, gritting his teeth. Klaus has always used this to mock him, but there was nothing he could do about it. Due to his handsome appearance, a lot of girls approach him. He always declines their offers. There was a time he went to an occasion with Klaus. He had to leave the occasion quickly due to the number of girls who made advances towards him. Reynolds had a girlfriend once, but they aren't together anymore. Klaus is the only one who hooks up with another girl the moment he breaks up with one. He was already tagged a playboy by Alice. They all played and laughed on their way home. The group always enjoyed each other's company. Having a girl in their midst didn't dampen the fun at all, it unexpectedly increased it. They all had playful personalities, so they got along pretty well. The moment Gray got home, he fell asleep. His head was a wreck, and he needed some time to rest. After getting a good rest, the fatigue will surely fade away. By the time Gray woke up, it was already dark. He felt the fatigue had decreased. If he could get a good night's sleep, he would be as good as new tomorrow morning, if not even better. Gray had a meal before he continued his rest. This was the first time in a while now that he got a good rest, and it felt refreshing. The next morning, Gray woke up earlier than usual. He felt very refreshed after the long rest he had. Since he still had time before the tournament starts for the day, he went out for his physical training. He noticed his spiritual energy was stronger than it was previously. With the increase in spiritual energy, he noticed he could feel the elemental particles in the air more clearly, and his mind was more relaxed, which in turn increased his focus. He felt his control over the elements was better than before. "I should be able to attempt it now," Gray said confidently. When he noticed how strong his spiritual energy was, he suddenly remembered there was a technique he had, but had never attempted it since acquiring it. Elemental fusion. He got the technique after breaking through to the arcane plane, but he had never once tried to attempt it since he felt his control over the elements wasn't good enough yet. But with this current increase in spiritual energy, his confidence increased. Gray calmed himself. He wanted to be in the best state before attempting it. The sun was just about to rise. The light from the rising sun passed through the trees and shone in the serious-looking face of Gray. When he felt he was prepared, Gray slowly stretched out his right hand. He put all his focus into sensing the surrounding elements. He slowly started using his spiritual energy to carefully guide the lightning and earth elements slowly towards the top of his outstretched hand. Although he also had the wind element, he didn't want to add it as well since controlling two elements at a time was already tiring. If he were to also add the wind element, he wasn't sure if he would be able to fuse them. Gray totally lost himself in what he was doing, and soon, lights made of brownish and silver colors started congealing at the top of his outstretched hand. Slowly an orb started taking shape with two different colors intertwining perfectly in it. After the orb grew to the size of a fist, it suddenly started trembling. Clearly, it was starting to become unstable. Shit, Gray cursed out when he noticed he was losing control of the orb. He tried to regain control over it. The trembling increased and Gray's heart suddenly tightened. The orb was about to explode and Gray felt an energy that scared the life out of him. The power contained in the orb was terrifying. If it exploded on his palm, he would definitely die. Fu *K. It's going to blow, Gray cursed again before he threw the orb in one direction and dashed towards the other direction. As he was running, he suddenly heard a deafening sound.
Boom.
The orb exploded in the forest. Gray's heart started beating faster and faster. When he turned to look, he felt the scare of his life. The explosion was expanding from the spot and moving towards him. Shit, Gray cursed repeatedly and employed lightning steps enforced with the wind element. He was practically on the verge of crying. Why didn't they say it was this dangerous? Gray was running like his life depended on it. Oh wait, it does. If he gets caught up this close to the blast, he would definitely lose his little life. It was clearly stated that the technique was dangerous, but it wasn't stated how dangerous it was. Inside the valley, Chris was sleeping peacefully. Brown was lying lazily on the ground.
Boom.
The sleeping Chris woke up from the sound and walked outside his little cabin. He looked towards the forest with interest before disappearing from his previous spot. Brown also raised her head vigilantly and was about to fly out on seeing Chris disappearing.
Stay here.
Chris's voice echoed out, but he was nowhere to be seen. Inside the academy.
Boom.
What is that? Blake suddenly looked towards the forest behind the academy. Lightning danced on his body before he disappeared. At different places on the academy, different instructors were heading towards the location of the blast. Did you hear that?
Of course I did, I'm not deaf.
What do you think made such a loud sound? I don't know, but from the direction of the sound, it came from behind the academy. Do you think it's an enemy attack? Who would be stupid enough to come here and attack us? The Starlight Academy? I don't think they have the guts to dare. We shouldn't bother about this, the instructors will take care of it. Whatever it is. Different conversations started off among the students. The explosion shook the surrounding. Some students thought it was the handwork of the Starlight Academy, others thought maybe some experts were fighting. The explosion became the hottest topic among the students. Back at the forest.
Creak.
The sound of rock grating against the ground sounded out.
Bang.
The rock fell on the ground with a loud sound. A youth who looked messed up appeared in sight. His hair stood straight and his face was covered with black substance. He was covered in armor which appeared to be made of rock. Some parts of the armor had holes in them. This was clearly a result of the impact. This was the new defensive technique he learned, earth armor. It would form an armor on the body of the elementalist. The strength of this technique increases with the strength of the elementalist. For now the armor is made to rocks. As his strength increases, it would be made of jade, before turning to crystal and then finally diamond. Gray looked at his surroundings with a disoriented look. He was still playing out what just happened. Gray was currently over 600 meters away from the blast. After the blast occurred, Gray tried running, but he was unable to surpass the speed at which it was moving. Luckily, he managed to get to the outer regions of the blast where the strength of the blast wasn't as strong as the central region. Gray made an earth wall to try to reduce the impact of the blast. After doing that, he also used earth armor to protect himself. He had to be extra sure. Fortunately, the wall was able to help him reduce the impact, but he still suffered from the little that passed through. I could have lost my poor little life if I didn't act fast. Gray whipped off the sweat on his face. He truly did feel fear when he lost control of the orb. The earth armor started falling apart from his body. The instructors will probably come here after this blast. What will I tell them if they ask me what happened? There is no way the blast won't attract the instructors over, and since Gray was currently the only one near the blast, they would naturally question him. There's no way I can tell them I was practicing a new technique. The strength of the blast exceeded what someone who is still at the arcane plane can do. Gray thought hard about it. Thankfully I didn't try it out when I was in the academy. Gray sighed. The thought of the consequences of destroying his home and maybe putting the lives of other students at risk terrified him. I should probably leave here. Gray turned and immediately started walking in the other direction. Where are you going? A voice suddenly rang out. Gray's heart tensed up when he heard this, but he didn't show it out. He had learned to mask his reactions well, so even if he's shocked or afraid, it would be almost impossible to notice it from his body language. He turned around calmly, only to see Chris standing midair looking down at him with interest. Chris was the first one to arrive here since his place was closer to the site of the blast, and he was faster. Teacher, I'm heading back to the academy. Gray replied calmly. What happened here? Asked Chris. I have no idea. I was training when I suddenly heard an explosion. Luckily I wasn't too close to it. Gray answered.
Okay. You should head back now.
Yes, teacher, Gray said and quickly dashed away from the place. Chris's eyes followed the shadow of Gray till he disappeared from his sight. Seems like this cook of mine has some secrets. Interesting. Chris heard everything Gray said when he arrived. When he arrived at the site of the explosion, he didn't sense anyone. He knew there was no way the person who did this attack would have already escaped before he arrived. He suddenly heard movements coming from some distance away and headed towards the place. When he arrived, he saw Gray pushing off a wall he used to protect himself from the blast. After hearing what he said, he knew this was done by Gray. But what he still couldn't figure out was how someone in the arcane plane could make an attack which strength equals someone at the early stages of the origin plane. It just doesn't make sense.
Whoosh.
Chris looked over when he heard this. He saw Blake coming towards him at a very fast speed. Blake quickly appeared in front of him. Senior, he quickly greeted as he saw Chris. What happened here? Oh, and I saw Gray leaving here just now, Blake asked. When he was flying here, he saw Gray leaving the place. Since Chris was already here, he must have met Gray. I don't know, seems like whoever did this already fled before I arrived, answered Chris. So fast? Blake was surprised. He knew just how fast Chris was. Did the blast affect Gray? Blake asked. He remembered how Gray looked when he saw him. Gray was like a beggar in the street. Some parts of his clothes were torn, so he guessed Gray might have suffered from the blast. He was able to act quickly and use his defensive techniques, but he was still impacted by it. But he should be okay, said Chris. He knew there was no way Blake would think Gray was involved in what happened. If not for accidentally hearing what Gray said when he arrived, he still wouldn't have thought Gray was involved also. The other instructors arrived while Chris and Blake were still conversing about the blast. Blake told them what Chris told him. They decided to investigate the site. After searching for some time and finding nothing, they all went back to the academy. But they agreed on increasing their guard since they still didn't know what caused the blast. Gray got back to his house and finally heaved a sigh. I was lucky today, but I did learn some things from this attempt. Although he was scared by the blast, he was also amazed by the strength of it. If he could master it, he would be able to easily defeat everyone in the arcane plane. He wouldn't even be scared of battling those in the first stage of the origin plane. Gray decided not to attempt it for now since he wasn't as confident anymore. But he would try it again in the near future. After he took his bath, he waited for his friends to arrive before they headed towards the arena. The group headed towards the arena while discussing the blast that occurred. Klaus was particularly lively about the topic. He was adamant the explosion was caused by two experts fighting. He even came up with a conjecture that Gray couldn't help but wonder if he was talking about the explosion he made. If Gray wasn't the one who made the blast, he would feel what Klaus said might be what truly happened. It made so much sense that you can't dispute it. They were not the only ones talking about it. Students in groups who were also heading towards the arena were all talking about it. After getting to the arena, they found a seat not too close to the platform and sat down to watch the battles that would take place before it gets to their turn. Gray would be battling in the second set of battles, while Reynolds would be in the third set. Gray's number was 8, so he will be battling the student with the plaque number 20. He was hopeful about the battle since the chances of meeting a student in the 8th stage of the arcane plane had increased, due to the decrease in numbers of participants. Currently, Klaus was the only student still at the 6th stage of the arcane plane among the participants. Although he didn't stand much of a chance fighting with those in the 8th stage, against those in the 7th stage, his chances are not bad. There was a total of 28 students in the 8th stage of the arcane plane who registered, and currently, 16 of those students have been eliminated. Most of them were eliminated while facing students of the same plane. Only one of them was eliminated by a student in the 7th stage of the arcane plane. The name of the student was Damien. He was a student from the Earth Hall, and he is currently the one with the most eye-catching performance so far in the tournament. Even Gray and his friends acknowledged his strength. The first round of battles soon started and Damien was among the first set of fighters. His opponent was someone from the Lightning Hall who was also at the 7th stage just like him. Compared to most Earth elementalists, Damien didn't focus fully on defense. He was focused more on attacking. Among all the elements, the Earth element is regarded as the mightiest element. Unlike the rest elements, the Earth element relies mostly on brute strength.
Who do you think will win? Asked Klaus.
Which of the battles are you asking about?
Alice asked.
There were currently 4 different battles going on, and one of them had 2 fighters in the 8th stage battling. The one with Damien, replied Klaus. Given the strength he has shown so far, he shouldn't have a problem with defeating his opponent, Reynolds said. He didn't have full confidence in defeating Damien, but he would love to battle him. Yeah, in the 7th stage, he has few rivals, Gray said while focusing his gaze on the platform which held Damien. How confident are you in defeating him? Alice looked at Gray. When the others heard this question, they also turned to look at him. They had never seen Gray go all out, so they were still in the dark about his true strength. They all knew Gray was strong, but they don't know just how strong he was. From what I have seen.
Gray paused.
He doesn't stand a chance, Gray said with a smirk. From all the battles he had seen so far, he hasn't seen anyone among the fighters that could make him go all out. Damien was strong, but from his performance from the battle with the student at the 8th stage, he was still lacking. Unless he was still hiding his strength even in that battle. He wouldn't know until he had a battle with him. The rest of the group could hear the confidence in Gray's voice. They all really started getting curious about Gray's true strength. I would like to see you fight against him, Alice said. Same here, Klaus and Reynolds said while raising their hands simultaneously, clearly agreeing with what Alice said. They also wanted to see Gray battle against Damien. I think we would get the chance, Gray smiled. They watched the battle of Damien and the lightning user. From the way Damien attacks, you could tell he was an experienced fighter. His strike was as precise as they were deadly, all his attacks were well planned out. His opponent started struggling just after the fight started. The battle went on for another 3 minutes before he finally yielded. He couldn't get past Damien's defense, and he was being struck by his attacks. He could barely stand, so there was no need to endure the pain when he knew there was no hope in winning this. Damien was the first to defeat his opponent among those in this set of rounds. After his victory, he walked to a less crowded space in the stands and took his seat. Soon the first set of battles ended, and it was time for the second set to begin. Gray headed to the platform, his number was called. He stood and waited for his opponent to arrive. He soon heard footsteps and saw a fairly handsome youth ascending the stairs to the platform. Finally Gray almost said this out loud. "Ready?" asked the instructor. "Yes. Yes." Both fighters answered. Gray was a little excited. He would be able to finally test out the strength of a student at the 8th stage of the arcane plane. Begin. Crack. Bam. As soon as the instructor finished his words, both fighters immediately sent out attacks towards their opponents. Gray sent out a series of lightning towards his opponent, who countered with his own attacks. They exchanged some more moves with Gray holding a clear advantage in the exchange. They both stopped and looked at each other. Gray smiled towards his opponent. Earth tremor, Gray muttered under his breath before he stomped one of his feet on the platform. Rumble. The platform starting vibrating, and his opponent nearly lost his footing from the sudden vibration. The sudden commotion immediately attracted more attention from the crowd. Since 4 battles were going on, some students pick a specific battle to watch and just forget about the rest. It's not like they could watch them all at the same time. But if any of the battles in the other platforms start getting exciting, it immediately draws their attention towards it. Gray sent 3 rocks flying towards his opponent. Just as the rocks were about to reach his opponent, he released lightning arrows which attacked his opponent from another direction. His opponent raised a wall of flame which blocked the arrows and only managed to dodge the rocks in a sorry manner. He was shocked by the strength Gray displayed. He could tell Gray hadn't gone all out yet. Not only that, but he was already breathing heavily and Gray's breath was still calm and collected like he has not even started fighting. Gray immediately went on the attack once again. Since his opponent could last longer than the previous ones, he wanted to enjoy himself. His opponent soon fell on a passive state and couldn't do anything to Gray. He was a fire elementalist, yet he was currently fully on the defensive and couldn't attack. He didn't want to admit defeat since losing meant he couldn't participate in the competition. Gray was kind not to be too hard in his attacks, but his opponent still had a hard time defending. Soon he sent him flying with a punch. He covered his hands with lightning, which in turn increased the strength of his attack. Thud. His opponent fell on the platform and passed out. The instructor came to check on him and noticed he only passed out. He also checked to see if his injuries were severe. Luckily Gray was lenient with him, so he didn't really have any severe injuries. As long as he gets a good rest, he should be okay. Gray wins. The instructor announced. Some students cheered when the battle ended. Gray walked towards his friends before seating calmly. Gray suddenly raised his head and looked in a specific direction. He saw Damien staring at him intently, with eyes filled with fighting intent. Seems like I attracted his attention. Gray smiled at Damien before shifting his gaze back to the platform. This was the first time Gray had fought more than a minute. The first battle he fought only lasted about 1 minute and the second one was even shorter. He hasn't attracted much attention since his battles had ended too quickly. People only felt he was strong since he was able to end his battle quickly. This battle only showed them a little glimpse of his strength. Hopefully he doesn't disappoint me, thought Gray with a smile. The second set of battles finished and the third set started immediately. Reynolds was part of the third set. As long as he didn't meet an opponent in the 8th stage of the arcane plane, his chances of victory were high if his opponent is in the 7th stage. Luckily, his opponent was a water elementalist in the 7th stage of the arcane plane. They fought for a couple of minutes before Reynolds got the upper hand. His opponent tried everything he could to reverse the situation, but the moment he allowed Reynolds to gain the upper hand, he lost the match. Another 2 minutes passed before he finally gave up. He sighed while leaving the platform. His dream of participating in the competition was over. Reynolds walked down from the platform with a smile on his face. He's currently one step closer to earning a spot. The last set of battles soon started. There was only one battle taking place since 12 had already been fought over the last 3 sets. The battle didn't last long. It ended with a victory for the student in the 8th stage of the arcane plane. After the last battle ended, the instructor walked towards the center of the platform. He called all the students who successfully advanced to the last round. Since we have 14 participants and there are only 11 spots, the last round will be different from the previous ones, the instructor said in a clear and calm voice. We would be using a ranking system to determine the final 11 students. Each student will have to battle with the rest 13 students, and the number of wins you acquire will determine your rank, he explained further. Conversations immediately started amongst the participants. With this new system, they wouldn't have a problem even if they lost. It was good news for the remaining few students in the 8th stage of the arcane plane. Gray felt excited about this. With this new system, he would be able to battle with each of the students at the 8th stage of the arcane plane. Currently, there were only 7 students at the 8th stage of the arcane plane. There were 2 in particular he really wanted to battle with. They were the ones he felt were the strongest amongst the participants. Including Gray, there were 6 participants in the 7th stage of the arcane plane. Klaus was the only one who was on the 6th stage, and this made him stand out from the rest. Having the weakest stage amongst them, the chances of him qualifying was not good. But they wouldn't write him off yet. Surprisingly, Klaus had only fought just one battle in the 3 rounds which took place. From the strength he displayed when he defeated his opponent, he had a shot at getting a spot. The instructor brought out the box as usual, which had 14 plaques inside, numbered accordingly. The students all stepped forward to pick a plaque. Each student will get to fight 4 battles each day. This round will last for 4 days, the instructor told them the rules of the round. Now go home and rest properly. Tomorrow the 4th round begins, the instructor left after this statement. Seems like he has his eyes on you. Klaus didn't miss the little exchange between Gray and Damien. He's not that bad. His grade is most likely blue, Gray replied after giving it some thought.
Yeah, but he's too, how should I put it?
Klaus thought of the right word to use.
Moody.
Reynolds joined in the conversation.
Yes, that's the word. He's too moody, Klaus said.
You don't expect everyone to be like you, right? Gray raised a brow. How can you live a life that isn't fun? Asked Klaus. You can't, Reynolds said firmly. You see, even Ray understands the importance of fun, Klaus said, pointing at Reynolds. Bastard, what's that supposed to mean? Reynolds cursed out on hearing Klaus's remark. Reynolds and Klaus immediately got into a heated cursing episode. The surrounding students all looked at them with weird eyes. Gray tried creating some space between them, so others wouldn't think he was with them. And where do you think you're going? Klaus called out to Gray when he saw him creating a distance between them. Foo *K, Gray cursed. And soon, the 2-man cursing team turned into a 3-man team. In the midst of cursing, they managed to walk back to their seats. On seeing the boys acting this way, Alice couldn't help but giggle. Being with them, especially Klaus, was always fun. There was rarely a dull moment in his life. After leaving the group, Gray headed towards the valley for his training. He was a little bit more experienced about it and knew he shouldn't try it all through the day. It wouldn't be great if he was exhausted before his battle. On his way to the valley, he passed through the place the blast occurred. The trees were all destroyed after the blast. Gray didn't come back to the main spot it exploded, so he didn't know the extent of the damage. Seeing the damage it made, he took in a deep breath. He still felt lingering fear towards the orb that exploded. The blast would have surely taken his life had he been close to it. He smiled wryly when he thought of it before walking towards the valley. When he entered the valley, a huge shadow suddenly launched towards him. Brown Gray called out on seeing the shadow. He placed his hand on the body of the griffin. His fingers ran through the hair on the neck of Brown before reaching the fur on the body. What a magnificent creature! Gray was awed by the griffin. When he went in, Chris was not in the valley. He guessed he must have gone out. This was not the first time he comes and didn't find him in the valley. Sometimes even after his training, Chris still wouldn't have returned. Gray still prepared the meal since Brown was waiting patiently for it. When he was done with eating, he immediately started his training. He could feel he would be able to inscribe soon. He hoped to successfully learn to inscribe before he heads to the competition, which would give him a trump card when battling with those at the 9th stage. Gray calmed himself and focused on making the inscription midair. After some time, a symbol suddenly lit up in the air, but it died down just as quickly. Gray was exhilarated by the initial success. This shows he wasn't far from it. Maybe he could even succeed today or the next. He continued his training, and sometimes he would be able to get the symbol to last longer, while other times he wouldn't be able to make it appear at all.